can talk amongst yourself. Really going to be a minute. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back to the home stretch. So for the next couple hours, we'll be reviewing the CIP budget. And for council members, just to give everyone a heads up, we will go category by category. So arts and culture, economic development, equipment and technology, facilities, parks and open space, public safety, transportation infrastructure, and water system in that order. I'll call out pages and we'll just open it up to anyone for questions on those sections. But let me start by asking the mayor to give any kind of big picture overview of our CIP budget this year.
Yeah, the big picture overview. Let me just say something briefly about that. But just from the last session, I just want to follow up on something that we had on DES and it relates to kind of deputy mayor, something I want to have you do.
Yeah, so I think we had a lot of conversation in the last hearing about litter, and I think it's important to reiterate all that is being done and provide something to council members that's a resource so that when you get questions, you can easily refer to that, and also having that all in one spot will also be good to see if there's any gaps that you identify. So we'll be producing a one-pager on that topic that covers major corridors, the who's doing what, needle pickup, all that kind of stuff. So
that way people can know what we are doing. I think that'd be helpful. I think obviously you can see by looking at the CIP that this is a tough year, obviously, but we have still tried to balance the challenges that we have with the needs that we have in the city. One of the things that we want to do is our peers and our peer cities look to us for what we've been able to do with our CIP, and part of what we've done is not stop investments even when times are tough. So I think that you will see still investments that are taking place. If things had to be pushed out, they were, but we still overall are still making lots of investments in our CIP. The other thing I would add is that one of the things that we have been good at and we will continue to do going forward is going after grants, particularly when you talk about our water system. I was listening to some of the hearing as I was in the middle of dealing with some other issues, and I didn't hear a lot of questions about water. But one of the things about water is, as you know, we are very, very close to, by 2030, meeting that goal of replacing every single lead pipe. And that is very, very important from an infrastructure standpoint. So that's something that will continue. And even if you don't see some of those dollars in the CIP, you will see those things happening as we use other funds that we have. So we're ready for your questions that you might have. And we're proud of the stewardship, and I want to thank the staff, all the staff that are here, that work so hard to make sure that our city and our city employees and our residents have good access to good capital improvement items, be they from radios to lead pipes. You know, we run the replacement of lead pipes, so we run the gamut of things that encapsulate the CIP. So with that, we'll take your questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple framing questions. So as you mentioned with the water, because my understanding is that the state had put out a bunch of money for some of that kind of infrastructure improvements. So there may be, what we're seeing in front of us is not inclusive of every capital improvement that's going to come our way this year. If grants are awarded, you will come to us for approval of grants, and the work commences from there.
Yep. And so when we come to you with any of these grants, they will be to accept the dollars to be able to do this. I'll give you a perfect example, something that wasn't in the CIP that just 2 months ago, the commissioner of DES and I stood with the New York State Facilities Environmental Corporation, and we got a couple of $1 million for our water plant at Hemlock and dollars for lead pipes, right? So we were able to go out and get dollars to be able to do that. So yes, it may not all be inclusive as here, and as we speak, we continue to look at grants, state, local, federal, private, to help augment a lot of the stuff that we do with the CIP. And even for some of the art stuff, some of those dollars, we go outside to get some of that. So,
but I presume everything that you had, even a pretty decent sense that we're going to get, is in here. There just will be some other stuff that pops up.
Suzanne, what would you say?
I mean, yes and no,
Yeah,
especially because the CIP, while it does include things that are funded by the state or the federal government or other entities, I mean, this is primarily our spending plan. So what you're looking at is what we're committing from a cash capital or a debt service perspective.
Right. So there's other stuff that will be coming that might not be debt or cash capital, which is good.
Yeah.
From that, but yeah.
Okay. And then the other framing question, we've talked about this a little bit, but just put this on the record for folks. The state had talked about $300 million coming to Rochester for capital improvements, most of which, or at least the biggest line item there, was the High Falls State Park, which is obviously a state park and it's state money being spent. But can you give a sense of what some of the other $225 million is going to be spent on, or the process by which that will happen?
Well, the process is we're still developing the process, but the process is it will be. I want to be clear because I don't want to let people think that obviously the state will be leading the process. Our role will be in prioritizing the same thing we do with affordable housing projects. When we prioritize the ones that we think are ready to move, we will do the same thing as it relates to the state process. But the entire process will be led, managed, and funded from the state. None of that money will flow to the city directly. It will be managed by the state, but it will be spent in an area that we've kind of outlined, and the dollars will come from New York State.
Got it. So not a penny of that money is in this CIP budget.
No, not at all. I mean, it might support something stuff that might be in here, but it's not in here now.
Well, the section major projects in need of funding,
right?
Page 24.
That's where we'd like the state to direct some of the money.
Yes, but
right.
It talks about the Rochester Monroe Transformation Initiative, and then it goes on for the next couple pages to include some items that were on the original request to the state for the money.
Right, but the money is not the dollars. The dollar is not. The dollars are not in here, and they would not be allocated in here. The state would fund those and go from there.
Great. All right, so we are going to go section by section, and then if there's anything big picture that's not captured by one of the sections, we'll make sure to have some time at the end for them. But we're going to start with the arts and culture section, which is only page 32 and 33. And just see if anyone has any questions about arts and culture. Page 32 and 33 in the CIP budget. While folks are getting there, I guess the question would just be the 26-27 cash capital expenditures for arts and culture is significantly lower than the out years, and I presume that this is less than what the 1% of fund would imply.
No, because the balance, if you read the narrative right above that table, talks about the amount of funding that is in the operating budget for planning. Right? We've gotten to this point where we allocate what the total amount is, and then it is split between capital and the operating budget based on what Kevin Kelly submits.
Got it.
From the Office of Planning.
Thanks. So that's the narrative that Suzanne so kindly directed me to on page 33 for everyone following along. Councilmember Leslie Smith, you had a question?
Yes, I have more of a general question, if that's okay. If maybe I can just get some understanding just from a fiscal space in terms of this entire section. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the CIP section is not just for capital projects, it's also for things we are capitalizing. Is that?
So it's all the money that we are appropriating in cash capital, which is a pay-as-you-go method of financing capital projects. And it also proposes authorization of debt for specific projects. It will also include some allocations for potential grants or other funding sources that we may receive.
Okay, and so this budget is not necessarily capitalizing equipment and things like that.
Oh, no, it is.
Oh, it is.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Okay, thank you.
Everything that is purchased with a funding source in here has to have a useful life as defined by Section 11 of the local finance law.
Thank you.
And what's the threshold, the dollar amount?
There isn't necessarily a defined limit by law. It's more of our internal limit, which I believe is at 5,000.
Great. Is that helpful, Councilmember? I presume there's no other questions on arts and culture because there's only one. Oh, Council Vice President?
I just want to get a clarity question, basically. And by the way, I am very happy that our city, has a arts and culture and public arts section. Our city is looking very beautiful with all the most recent things that's just been placed by the mayor's administration. I see here it says it would be split, and the allocation is 51,000. So if for example you were saying that there's grants, it would not be reflected in here, but we would still be able to move forward on public art if we were to secure grants.
Yes.
Okay,
And that would have to come before council to be appropriated.
got it. So I just want to make sure I was clear on that.
Okay, so we're going to, Councilmember Monroe.
Are there grants out there that would allow us for upkeep of the sculptures and monuments we already have? Because this seems to be really for new items, the 50,000.
I mean, there might be, but most grants do not provide for upkeep. Most grants are for actual investment, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
They will fund the initial installation, but then the city becomes responsible for the maintenance and upkeep, which has to go into the operating budget, not capital.
So dealt with kind of on a case-by-case basis as things are presented. And I guess that brings me to Commissioner Okansi. Do we have money for the 104 structure piece of sculpture there at Lake in 104?
No, excuse me. No, that fund is not in here. That's actually that would be a maintenance cost, and that would not be reflected in CIP.
Oh, right. And is it not in the operating budget either?
It's not.
Okay, because I know it is a substantial amount of money, like 250,000 that's been batted around. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to economic development, which is pages 35 to 40. 35 to 40. And turn it over to anyone who may have some questions. Economic development. I'll jump in and ask a question. We talked a little bit yesterday about the home buyer assistance program, or 2 days ago now with NBD, and I know that we see $300,000 equal across the next 5 years. Is that roughly what I know that's what we budget every year. Do we spend that much on the home buyer assistance program?
Thank you, Council Member. We haven't had an allocation for the homebuyer assistance program in a few fiscal years. This is the first time receiving an allocation, I believe, since fiscal year 23. And that's because of slowdowns in the market due to the pandemic and then the housing shortages. However, we are starting to see increase uptake in the current year. And so the dollars are starting to move, and so this will enable us to meet the need for the coming year. Remember that these funds are also supplemented with other funding sources, home dollars, CDF dollars, to meet the needs. So we will need this in order to ensure that we can provide those ongoing homebuyer assistance grants to our customers.
And this $300,000 is all for individual owner-occupied homes.
Yes, yep, for the home buyers to assist them with those closing costs. And
we talked a couple of days ago about how about inspections. Councilmember Martin was asking about inspections, and you mentioned that the federal funds ultimately require inspection. These are separate from that?
These are part of the overall pot of funds that we use, and these can be used to be a bit more flexible with the customers who maybe are a bit outside of the income range for the federal funds, but still within state guidelines. So we want to make sure that we have the ability to serve all of the income qualified buyers that we partner with.
It is slightly more flexible money, though.
Yes.
Okay. President Melendez.
Yes, thank you. The roof rehabilitation program, $575,000 allocation for each year in the next 5 years. I know cost of materials and support for that has gone up. Could you, if not today, provide in writing how much or how many estimated roofs we would be able to replace with that allocation?
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide an estimate. You're absolutely right that costs have gone up considerably, roughly double since prior to 2020. So that limits our ability to spread those dollars further around. But what we receive is what we spend on a given year.
Got it. Thank you. And in the past, I know that we've carried over from year to year for roof repairs back when we had a little bit more cash. Is there anything in this program still, or is everything expended?
We are not carrying a balance.
Thank you.
Vice President Harris, come down the line right here.
Thank you, Chair Gruber. I'm looking at the downtown development, and just like to ask questions about the revitalization initiative. It's basically unfunded, and in this proposed CIP, but is there a possibility that you are funding it with grant funding at all, the rest of this, or is it completed?
Is that the downtown streetscape enhancements project?
Yeah, it's the downtown revitalization. Yeah, that's what I was asking.
No, the new one that we had put, it was in last year's CIP for Division Street.
Yeah, that was I think it was called the DRI project, but effectively it's the additional funding for the Main Street Commons, as well as reconstruction of Division Street and improvements to the rear side of the Mortimer Street garage.
So that's all completed?
Not completed, no. There was some funding that was secured, but not to the level that we needed. So to answer your question, yes, if we can secure grant dollars to advance that project, we're certainly going to be trying to do so.
Okay, so I certainly understand that, we might have to pause, of course, the current climate. Just keep an eye on that. We're just interested in seeing our downtown revitalized, and we certainly can appreciate, that reasoning. Thank you. I have no additional questions.
In the budget book on page 37 under housing, I'm just curious about the amount that is allocated for affordable housing development. I don't know if this is on par in previous years. And also, what is this 175 annually generally utilized for?
Yeah, thank you. So we have two programs that are here. One is the Affordable Homeownership Development Program, and then the other is the Affordable Housing Development Support programs. So obviously the Affordable Homeownership, that is a relatively new program. This is at the third fiscal year that we've sought funding for that, and the goal there is to continue to support the growth of affordable new owner-occupied homes in the city. We the previous 2 years received $400,000 each year, and this is an allocation for $175,000. We have not made any commitments for those funds at this time. We've been able to advance our partner projects without spending dollars through this. We are imminently, meaning by the end of the day today or on Monday, releasing our 2026 affordable housing RFP, which will be the next opportunity to see what other projects may be out there, both for home ownership and for affordable rental. And that process will ultimately then determine, is there a need for the city to offer additional supports beyond what the state offers for affordable home ownership through either the AHOP program, the Affordable Home Ownership Opportunity Program, or the Block by Block program, which both are targeted for affordable home ownership here in the city. The other program that you mentioned, Affordable Housing Development Support, that is targeted for affordable rental projects, and we're carrying a relatively small balance of about $350,000. So this allocation would bring us up to $600,000 ish for this, and that goes to provide gap financing to enable us to deliver affordable and permanent supportive rental housing development across the city. And again, we supplement that with other sources of funds, as well as working with our state partners.
Okay, I'd love to talk with you a little bit more about that in detail, because I'm interested in knowing exactly how each person, group might benefit from this resource, from the direct homeowner versus the developer, et cetera. I have another question on page 39 around land acquisition. There's $700,000 allocated each year for the next 5 years for demolition. I would imagine that if there is, because I know sometimes you all are forced into doing demolition on properties that city does not own. And so what does the process look like from for the acquisition portion of that? At what point does the city say, we want to now acquire this vacant parcel?
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide. I can't remember if we also said we'd do so at the departmental budget hearing, but happy to provide a response on the process that goes into when the city acquires property.
Excellent. And last question on neighborhood development. I'd love to have a little bit more detail on what the Market View Heights revitalization plan actually is, and if there are any additional projects, irons in the fire, maybe perhaps not for this particular CIP, but in the future around neighborhood development.
Yeah, not only would we be happy to provide you with information to get more details on what is planned for Market View Heights, but just to quickly answer, this is an existing plan that we've been slowly, methodically approaching for implementation. Ultimately, it's focused on Lewis Street one block, right, in South Market View Heights, and ultimately will result in land assembly to deliver a home ownership project in Market View Heights.
I also wanted to mention something you will see that is not in this booklet, but you will see in all the legislation that you receive for the month of June are all the community development block grant allocations. And some of these items that we're talking about actually have allotments for demolition and things of that nature. They just don't appear in this booklet.
Councilmember Lupien.
With the items listed under housing, understanding that the city is only giving a portion, can you provide the total number of dollars that are going into those buckets from the different funding sources?
From the sources that are under the city's control? Or
what do you mean by under our control?
Meaning, are you referring to not only our CIP dollars, but our home dollars, where
Yes.
those are being invested?
All of the monies that we get from the state or federal government, yep.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to provide that.
Any further questions on economic development? Okay. Then we're going to move over to the next section, which is equipment and technology. That's from page 41 to 51. And there's about 6 different subcategories there, so that folks get situated. I'll ask a warm-up question here about the employee. The employee intranet. See the $120,000 expense this year. What should we expect from a timeline perspective, and what are the benefits to come?
Thank you, Chair Gruber. So the 120,000 is allocated for the implementation. The good news is the technology.
Using the mic. Sorry.
Just a little closer into the mic.
A little closer to the mic.
The 120,000 is for the implementation. The good news is the technology has been selected. So we have selected the platform. We are in initiation and planning, which means we're designing the implementation. For timeline, we're expected end of this calendar year to be ready or close to early next year. And it's a platform that already is used for the website. So trusted, proven to work.
And this is really about interdepartmental communication, essentially?
Correct, for employee use. And this will positively impact collaboration internally within the city departments and for employees to be able to look up the information they're looking for.
Great, thank you. Additional questions in this section? Councilmember Martin, followed by President Melendez.
On page 46, in the street pavements management system, there is $0 allocated. Can you talk about why?
Yes, hi. Thank you for the question. Yes, we are in the process of selecting a firm right now with prior year cash, and we do not anticipate needing to do this process again for several more years. So the out year funds that you see will collect over a few years, and so we do this every 4 to 5 years.
That's helpful. Thank you. On page 42, where it says security and surveillance, $100,000 allocated for this year. Can you talk about what purchases fit into this category? In the table under summary by subcategory.
So those are funds that we typically use for cameras around our city facilities. We do have a pretty good balance from previous years. So as budget efficiency, we were able to cut some. We've done significant camera upgrades at all our facilities to a point that I think we have cameras at every location at this point. So this is really a efficiency measure as it is.
Thank you. And to clarify, you mean cameras in city-owned buildings?
City-owned buildings, correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
President Melendez.
Yes, thank you. So there's a allocation, not this year, but in the 27-28 budget for constituent relationship management software solution. Can you talk about where we are in that process? It looks like we're probably going to be starting to spend dollars as soon as next year, but want to get a good sense of what that looks like, what that process looks like, and what it will include.
So we are in what we call the business case stage, where we are evaluating the market landscape, the solutions that are available, and at the same time, we are assessing our own internal systems. Why? Because with that implementation, our internal systems will integrate with that new system. So we have to make sure that our data, and of course, headed by our chief data officer, we have to make sure that our data is ready and can connect seamlessly to the new system that will be implemented. So think of it as two parallel tracks: exploring, evaluating market landscape, and preparing our data internally.
So one quick follow-up then. As you do the internal assessment, I think it will be important that there's a conversation with the council department as well, just to talk about some of the things we might be interested in. And so I would welcome the opportunity to set something like that up in the coming months.
Absolutely, and because the PMO is leading this exercise in collaboration with IT, with the data office, with OMB, with comms, we will definitely facilitate those meetings.
Thank you.
Of course.
Additional questions on equipment? I'll ask one more. Talked about it a bit yesterday with RPD, but just want to mention it again. If climate isn't enough of a reason to push us towards EVs, I'm hoping the cost of gas is. So where are we in terms of any kind of EV fleet purchases? I know years ago there was massive backlog and supply chain issues. Are there plans to purchase any new EVs for the city fleet? Thanks, Scott.
So EV has been a tough thing to balance just because cost, and the limited funds now we're trying to maximize them as much as possible. However, I can tell you in this year's budget plan, there are 16 of the, I think, 79 vehicles in the plan to purchase that are technically feasible. So there's technically feasible and there's economically feasible. So of the ones that we're going to purchase, there's 16 that we can look hard at. We do look at opportunities. Every single time we purchase a vehicle, we are looking at options for electrification or alternative fuel options. And based on cost and operations and duty cycle, we're trying to make the best decisions we can. We still are maintaining a 6% KPI on our alternative fuel vehicles. So we're not going down, but we're kind of planed off right at the moment.
So this budget this CIP includes 79 new vehicle purchases in the coming year.
I believe, I would double check that, but I think it's something like that.
And when you say that there's 16 that are technically feasible, obviously a garbage truck, for example, is not something that they're making electric garbage trucks quite yet.
Correct.
But so the 16 that are roughly
So they're SUVs, they're vans, they're cars that aren't needed, 24/7. Those types of areas.
And so each of those vehicles has, despite being in one place in the budget, you have a process for each of those purchases one by one, obviously with procurement, et cetera. And at each time you examine and hopefully evaluate every possible pro and con of going electric versus buying a regular gas vehicle.
That is correct.
Okay. Thanks. If there are, first I would just say I hope there are some considerations for EV in some of those. I think that the cost of fuel is going to be something that's going to, it's not going to come down dramatically anytime soon. So I think there's real rationale for spending more upfront and less long term. But as you make these determinations, maybe this is more to the commissioner, if there are, and hopefully when there are some alternative vehicles purchased, please just keep us posted along the way.
Yes, absolutely, we will.
I want to call your attention to page 49. You'll see a large allocation for general debt for motor equipment, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the conversation we had earlier this morning about ordering refuse vehicles and the lengthy amount of time it takes to order and receive those. We have, due to budget constraints over the past couple of years and post-COVID, it takes forever for vehicles to be delivered. And we have not necessarily funded the general fund to the level necessary in order to purchase those vehicles that need to be replaced. And so in turn, equipment services has seen some additional costs in maintaining vehicles, as well as additional fuel costs, like what you were saying. So we are actually asking for an exception to the debt limit of this $3 million so that we can get a jump on purchasing some of these vehicles, hoping to get ahead of some of those maintenance costs and hopefully to purchase something that has some more fuel efficiency.
This council approved ordering police cars, I believe it was like 2022. How long did it take for those to finally be delivered? It was like 3 years?
It was about 2
years.
Yes.
So I mean, it's taken forever. Yeah. Imagine if you went to go get a car. They said, "Oh yeah, we'll have your car," and you get it 2 years later. But so it's the time is crazy how long it's taken to get some of these vehicles, and you can imagine if it's a garbage truck or something that's even more technical than just a regular car. So even a regular car is taking almost 2 years just to get things.
We don't want to be Buffalo.
Agreed. Vice President Harris.
I just got a follow-up question about that, and it just leads me to believe, not believe, but to think about, is there an opportunity for us to get cross uses from some of the vehicles that we're planning to purchase?
If possible to get
like cross uses, multiple uses, garbage truck.
I mean, like the garbage trucks are used for snow plowing,
right? But I'm thinking about for other, while we're waiting, but
right.
For other departments to consider that.
So surprisingly, refuse and local works are a little easier to fund because they have separate charges that pay for those purchases.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you get into the tax supported funds that it's hard to make those investments.
Understood. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, we're going to, sorry, Councilmember Monroe.
Director Warren, so could you talk a little bit more about looking for an exception to the debt limit for the $3 million? That seems unusual.
Actually, I have a 27-year history of the CIP here
Excellent.
In front of me. And we have, over the past years, made multiple different requests to have you grant exceptions to the debt limit. If you'll recall, the debt limit policy goes back to 1981, where we do not borrow any more than we pay back in any given year for principal. There have been different reasons that we have asked for exceptions to this. Most of the time we're asking for items that might be like a grant match because, we want to take advantage of the funds that are coming from another source. If we see that there's some sort of need that, interest rates are much lower than we think they're going to be 2 years from now. So we have a history of that. And this one, I think, will pay off in the long run because hopefully when we get these new vehicles, the savings that we will see in the maintenance costs will offset the interest expense that we will see.
Yeah, and it's so scary because some of my colleagues, I have a colleague downstate where mayors have donated their old police cars and refuse trucks that they were getting rid of because they just didn't get a jump on or they did not keep up with the vehicles that they needed. So for this is something that we would support. We hope folks will support and is important because we need to be out ahead of getting these vehicles before the other ones go goodbye or we don't have any to perform the service that we need. So it will actually end up paying off in the long run, hopefully.
And again, so this is for those new garbage trucks that'll be coming through, as well as additional vehicles throughout the fleet.
So this is general fund. So this would purchase some heavy vehicles. I don't know, Scott, if you want to add what these would purchase.
Yes. So it is they're going to be like 10-wheel dump trucks, plow trucks, 6-wheel plow trucks, those types of heavy-duty, long expected time for delivery type vehicles.
Do we have to pay up front, or is there a percentage that we have to pay up front?
Occasionally there's a deposit that you have to pay, but
okay,
for the most part, you pay the full balance on delivery.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move over to facilities, which is page 52 to 72. A lot of different subcategories here. Let me start with a question, then I'll turn to President Melendez. City facilities general rehab, page 60. There's a pretty significant amount of money here, both in cash capital and in our own debt. What is planned with this money? Page 60, Suzanne, on city facilities general rehab.
So I think you'll understand we have a lot of facility needs across our building inventory. In our allotment for cash capital and for debt, we had a little bit of money left over, and we plugged it into this allocation, knowing that more than likely we would have to use it.
Got it. So there isn't a plan yet. It's just, I agree, it's a very logical place to put any money that we have.
Right. We have a lot of facilities that have a lot of needs.
Because this line is inclusive of generally rec centers, libraries, and any place that's not specifically called out in previous subsections.
Correct.
Okay. President Melendez?
Yes. Page 53, summary by subcategory. I have two questions. One, for the convention center year 28-29, there's a roughly $4 million allocation. Could you give us a sense, and it could be done in writing, of what that will entail? I know that convention center got a large supportive funds from the state, so just want to get an understanding of what that might be. The second question, relative to parking garages, I'm reminded in the CIP why we want to get rid of parking garages. But could we get a breakdown of the summary for parking garages in terms of which garages and what the anticipated work might be? Thank you.
Councilmember Lupien.
For the convention center, I'm seeing projects for modernization and building envelope. Where is the money targeted for expansion?
Is it the expansion or the modernization? the 59 million that we're getting from the state.
So maybe we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard of talk of this project where we're going to get, you know, more space to hold bigger conferences. Is
Okay.
this the modernization project?
That's part of the modernization.
Okay.
So that's New York State funded in the current.
Okay, so other than the conveying system equipment for the elevators, that's the only thing that the city's on the hook for?
At this time, potentially.
Can you say more?
So the modernization, we're about to engage on the design.
Mhm.
There's structural. There's going to be interior, mechanical. That's all going to be part of what's being looked at as this project. There's things that 60 million will go so far.
Mhm.
There's other things that we have identified. Some of this work here potentially could be part of the work if we can stretch the dollars as far as we can.
Mhm.
So we identified, certainly needs. Once we get the architects and engineers in to really look at the fabric of what's needed, then we'll start sort of chipping away as part of the project. So.
And the design has been previously authorized, the funding for that?
Yes, we came to council in April for the design.
Could you provide all of the funds and what they're for this modernization project that we've encumbered so far?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Leslie Smith.
This may be similar to what Council President asked already, but with respect to the convention center, it looks like the bulk of the expenses are in 28, 29. Is that where we anticipate the project going in terms of completion?
So the money that we're receiving from the state is appropriated off budget, not within the CIP. But I think what is missing from this booklet intentionally are prior year allocations that are making up our share, our required match for that project. And they were appropriated in prior years, either through cash capital or debt authorizations.
Got it. So that those expenses have already hit the books, is what
Yes,
you're saying.
correct.
Got it. I just want to make a note that I get to travel and go to a lot of different conferences, and I've spent a lot of time in convention centers, and I'm grateful that we are doing this work at the Rochester Convention Center. I'm a customer there on an annual basis, and we just do not have our facilities up to date as other communities do. So I'm just thank you, City of Rochester, for doing this.
Any additional? Councilmember Martin.
So in facilities, I was looking for anything around the animal shelter. Can you point me to, it's possible I may have missed it, but can you point me to any capital investments in the animal shelter?
So there's an annual allocation for the animal shelter in this current budget. The majority of the work on the kennel replacement and that other renovation was already appropriated in prior years. And I think you authorized debt for a portion of it a couple months ago, if not a year ago.
Okay, thank you. And still on the same topic, on page 31, in the section around major projects in need of funding, there's a summary that talks about the project cost being $44 million to get a new shelter building that would almost double in size. Can you talk about the hope, the vision for that, where funds may come from, and
I could talk about that. There is no provision for it. Essentially, $44 million would eat up our entire tax-supported cash capital and debt limit for 1 year.
So we put that in there because we're hoping that we will meet a nice benefactor that might want to have their name on that building. And there are people who love animals, would love to have their name on there. We've had a couple of folks that we've talked to and pitched the idea to. Even if imagine if it could be, and this is dream, NSC on one side and then an animal shelter on the other. You know, if it was called like the Stanley Martin Memorial, you know, like we would. But that's what we think is important to put in there, just to show that what the cost is. Not impossible, but even if somebody wanted, two sources wanted to give, you know, $25 million, and then the city tried to give it the rest of it. But I think it's important for people to see what a new nice one would be that would double in size, what the actual cost would be. Yeah, and that's what it would be.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the visioning here. Thank you.
Question about pools, mostly in the out years. Just want to make sure I get a chance to understand the lay of the land. So Adams Street is out right now, out of commissions. We talked about Commissioner Green. And Lightfoot is being worked on, or is going to be worked on this year. I see that next year, 27-28, there's $3 million allocated for Jackson. So I'm assuming that means we would work on Jackson once Lightfoot and Adams are done and completed, right? We wouldn't take that pool offline if the other ones weren't done yet.
That is correct.
And I'm mortified to see $425,000 in 2 years for the GVP pool, because it feels like we just finished it. But I'm guessing that there's a compelling reason why we need to do the sand filtration replacement. Can someone just help me understand what that is specifically?
I will answer. Thank you. So the sand filtration system was original to the pool 50 years ago. It is challenged at this point. The sand itself, as you might anticipate, accumulates particulate matter that continues to hamper the filtration capacity of the system. So that is the impetus for replacing it. We were not able to replace that during the pool renovation project that took place a few years ago.
Got it. And unlike the pool replacement work where the whole deck was done, this would, I assume, keep the pool offline for a much shorter amount of time, replacing the sand filtration system?
Correct, and it could be done in the off-season. There would be no temperature-sensitive work, such as exterior concrete, that would require it to be done during the swimming season.
Great. Can't wait for all of our pools to be open at once, and then I can start bugging you guys about an additional pool.
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is that we're really blessed in this community to still have pools. Period. I think if you look at many urban to the west, to the east, they don't come close to the number of public pools that we have and spray parks. So I think the CIP is a good reflection of us staying committed to making sure that our folks have access to pools, because when you look at tough funding situations like we're in right now, in most cities, pools are the first things that go. But we've said no. We've doubled down, and not only have built a model for lifeguards that I think is one of the best models in the country. We've also said, you know what, we're going to keep investing in our pools.
Well, and us too. I mean, certainly not the Evans administration, but years ago, many of the things that are now spray parks were once pools. And you look at a city like Philadelphia, and they probably have 10 times the number of public pools that we have. So let's get these ones in order, and then I'm going to push. And Councilmember Monroe, I'll let you know, I will be pushing for a pool in the Charlotte community. Once I think that's a place. Many Great Lakes cities have good, not just obviously the lake, but public pools to swim in.
And then remember, let me also point out, if you look at the city school district, a lot of these places already have pools. So it's not like you need to reinvent the wheel and build another pool. We have to work with the city school district and see how they can also get all of their pools that are open year round, particularly the indoor ones. We have some. Franklin has an amazing pool. Yep. Edison, Charlotte. So we have these pools. So it's not like we need to build new pools. We just need to look at the existing inventory and make sure that we are keeping them open between the city and the school district. And we'll be on our way. We'll be reaching nirvana as it relates to pools.
Well, I may respectfully disagree, but I'll do it in 2028-29 once we have all of our other pools in order. Let's move over to parks and open space. Oh, sorry, Vice President Harris, go ahead.
I just want to add just a humble request, and I'm not sure if it is possible, but to consider when you do look at the GVP pool to see if there's an opportunity to add heating so we can extend the season. You know, many of the swimmers that swim there, it's an Olympic-sized pool, right? You know, they use that to help train for competitions and stuff. So, I mean, it's a great amenity. So, you know, just something to consider.
Thank you. Parks and Open Space, it starts at page 73 and goes through page 86. Councilmember Monroe.
I'd like to start the discussion with the port terminal. Now that we have American Cruises, and I see that we do have money for next year in cash capital, what are we planning and what have we done now? What do we have in place now for their presence at the terminal building?
So the funding that you see here is to look at, are you looking at 200, is it the out year? What page are you specifically looking at? I just want to make sure I'm speaking to it.
You know, my marked copy, I accidentally left it home.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. Yeah, the cruise ships. So this is doing an additional assessment. So Great Lakes Cruises was a venture that came to us. They surprisingly came to us about a year ago, said that there's this venture that they have about going around different ports around the Great Lakes. On our own, we were also assessing whether or not how we can get cruise lines into the port, larger cruise lines into the port. So this funding is targeted towards, we're using Great Lakes Cruises as a sort of studying how they're efficiently getting into our port. But this additional funding out years will help us further assess how we can get larger vessels into our port. So there will be works like dredging that we certainly know about that needs to be done to accommodate. There will be some things that need to be worked on with the Coast Guard, with Army Corps engineers, things like that. So this is part of that funding to help us do an assessment to get larger cruise lines into the port.
And do we know for their operations when they have their different places that people can tour when they disembark? Do they have a shuttle service that they're using and kind of a formalized tour, or are people then just going off on their own? And
you talking about Great Lakes?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
They had excursions on that they managed themselves. Yes.
Okay, so they pull everybody into a big van or whatever and take them around. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was on their website and it just wasn't clear to me how they were visiting all the locations. What about a welcome center or some way within the terminal to make it feel more welcoming? You know, we have that large open space, and we just have that one desk and a security guard. It feels abandoned.
Yeah. That you bring a good point. I mean, this funding is going to look it's going to be all encompassing, right? We're going to look at that as part of this assessment to accommodate any larger endeavor that comes to the port. So yes, looking at our current structure, how it's configured, how it accommodates. Here's Buffalo, as you know, has managed to get some state funding to do their port. They're developing their port right now for larger vessels. So part of this money will be looking at how Buffalo's moving forward on their endeavor. Certainly, it'll help us better understand how we can position ourselves to work with the state to leverage some state funding.
Great. I should certainly take myself on a field trip to Buffalo.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is very exciting, and I'm wondering, what is our schedule for the bathroom cleaning there? It seems, depending, what goes on there. There are a lot of public that come through, and sometimes the bathrooms are in decent shape, and sometimes they aren't.
Thank you.
We have staff that's stationed up there all throughout the day, so it gets cleaned multiple times a day. I think there might be some discrepancy in the evening hours. Certainly when there's might be events at Arbor at the Port. But I can send you a more detailed schedule of when our cleaning staff is at the facility.
Okay, sure. I didn't realize that we had dedicated cleaning staff that stay there and
We
aren't
do.
floating around. So that's very good to learn. The Rose Garden, I was very happy to see the addition of the gazebo, but in the copy I was looking at, we have a gazebo and gazebos. So I'm hoping, is this to replace both the large and the small gazebo?
That would be the plan. Where this funding is, as we identify here, is for design. So as part of that design, we'll be talking to the community to see how best to, if it is one structure or two structure, or replacing both, how best to design it for the needs of the community. So, yes.
Do you have what quarter you think that project, the designing and outreach, when that might launch?
No target date, yes. Yet. We'll work with the community on identifying what our
I guess
workload.
just when you be starting the design
Yes.
process, are you looking first quarter, second, third, fourth?
Can I get that back to you in writing?
I'm sorry.
Can I get that back to you in writing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You have a lot of happy people about that, so I really appreciate that responsiveness to what residents have been asking for and visitors. So the Rose Garden, as we continue to improve it, it just becomes a better asset to the entire city and for visitors as well. And that wraps up my questions. Thank you so much.
On page 81, do you have a sense of which tennis and basketball courts you are going to prioritize improving?
So we continue to prioritize basketball courts and tennis courts, and as we complete that list, we can let you know.
Sounds good. Thank you. And one more question. On page 80, the Parcel 5 phased implementation, what specific infrastructure improvements are you planning on making?
So we're currently working on electrification and water to the site. So this will provide enhanced electrical infrastructure to the tree pits along the side streets and future electric to a future marquee, as well as a stage power panel for large-scale events when we set up the stage on the south end of the site. And it will also provide water, 4 ground hydrants approximately, so we can water the lawn, keep it in top condition, or as best condition as we can. And then the future funds that we're requesting are for improvements to the south end of the site and north end of the site, to put up some fencing, remove some features there that impede the operations of bringing in the stage and set up, but also it will help reduce operationally, bringing in barricades and things like that to set up during operations. We're looking at a small dog run to take the stress of dog use off of Parcel 5 and put it on the smaller grass parcel by the restroom and security building. And then we also hope to replace the lawn. The lawn was installed as a temporary fixture. It's about 4 to 6 inches of soil over a compacted gravel base. If you go out there at end of the season, it starts looking a little worn, starts to collect water and puddle. It really needs a full overhaul with proper drainage, proper soil profile to make it last and make it stand up to the traffic that it gets.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We're going to just keep going down the line here, but before I pass it to President Melendez, on the electrification of Parcel 5, will that be done this year?
The intent is to start that this fall. As soon as the season's over, I believe the last event is scheduled for mid-October.
So no events this summer will have any they'll have to bring in all their own stuff that they've done in the past, but next festival season they should be good to go.
Correct.
Okay. President Melendez?
Yes, thank you. So I know Councilmember Patterson asks about libraries every year, and I ask about Running Track Bridge. So I'd like to, so I do see that it is in the CIP for 26-27 on page 82. And then also in the requested potential projects, it's on page 31, which has a total estimated cost of about $30 million. So first, I'd like to understand, in the 26-27 allocation, what will that entail?
So this was related to a consolidated funding application we submitted last year. And this is a New York State DOS grant-supported project to establish a trail connection between the trail at Vincent Street on the south side of Smith Street, a crossing across Smith Street, and then continuing up along Cliff Street. I believe it's to Ambrose Street for a future connection to the bridge when it is converted. But it'll also provide that continual northern connection of the trail, slight bypass of the Lake Avenue corridor, but eventual connection to the running track bridge.
Got it. So this is really the not the bridge itself, but the adjacent parcels that would connect to the bridge.
Correct.
Great.
The running track bridge is still in our major projects in need of funding. The overall bridge, and hopefully maybe New York State will want to pay for it.
I'm glad you went there, because that's exactly where I was going back to. So on page 31, I know that we're receiving $300 million, 75 intended for development of High Falls State into the state park, which I know that's going to be focused on everything down in the gorge as part of the phase 1. However, in the $225 million, I'm not looking for an answer right now, but in the $225 million allocation that's supposed to also be adjacent to the state park for the city and the county to consider, I would hope that we would potentially consider running track bridge as part of that $225 million allocation. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
On the subject of Parcel 5, I hear that we're making improvements to make festivals more, be able to handle festivals more easily. I wanted to follow up on, you said fencing. Can you say more about that?
Sure. We're just looking at fencing along the very northern section on Main Street and then on the southern section along Elm, just basically to bookend the lawn area. The sides would remain open, because that's essentially, if you go out there for a festival, one of the larger scale Jazz Fest, Fringe Fest events, they typically, our operations has to bring out hundreds of linear feet of barricades.
Mm-hmm.
This would provide some containment to lessen the amount of barricades they need to bring out for any of those events, but still keep it open for daily public use.
I am concerned about the feeling of openness if we put a fence along Main Street.
What we're proposing is a 3.5, 4 foot high open fence, not a solid barricade by any means.
Okay. And also, looking at the project that we're doing on Main Street, it looks like there's some features being added to activate the space. And for years, I've been hoping to see that on Parcel 5. An open piece of grass is great for festivals, but it's not super great for people who just want to spend some time there. And I think it would benefit the entire downtown to have that space be more activated. And what can we do in terms of features, understanding that they need to either be movable or flexible enough to have festivals be able to get around them? What can we do to activate that space?
So say more.
So all of us have traveled to different cities, and we see their open spaces, and they have shade structures and places to sit, and feet like pathways, and
Yeah, no, I think there's an opportunity to add even more. I think once we get all these basic things that we just talked about, we definitely would. I think from then we'll be able to get to exactly the point that you're talking about. That would be like the optimal goal. I think of Bryant Park in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've been there,
mm-hmm.
but that's what I would love for us to be able to get to at some point as we go in this phased approach of adding those things. But yeah.
Do you have an idea of timeline?
I would love to do it ASAP, I would say. But I think we have to sequence it a little bit. I think these things, once they're there, I think that will allow us to be able to really do a lot of those things that you mentioned.
Is there anything stopping us thinking about design ahead of those
No,
features
I don't
being
think so,
installed?
because we have right now planning is working on looking at open spaces in the city
Mhm.
and Parcel 5 will be part of that. So I don't think that precludes us from thinking about some of the stuff that could be there. I got tons of ideas, stuff
Mhm.
along the side where you can have vendors and all that,
Yes.
all those types of things. But I think with city planning, I don't know if Kevin's in here. We're
Yeah, I
still
see
in the
him.
process of doing the open space study, Kevin, downtown open space stuff.
Yeah, so the project that we're looking at doing is called the Downtown Public Spaces Strategy.
Mhm.
And it's basically taking a holistic look at all of our public spaces downtown and how they operate, and not just looking at any given one in a vacuum and how you can maximize it, but really looking at it as a system and
Mhm.
to see, for example, which public spaces are best to operate as passive public spaces, which ones are best to operate as active public spaces where we'd be more intentional about programming those spaces. So we need to do a better job of establishing the identities of each of our public spaces, and that will drive how we program them or not program them and
Mhm.
maintain them and that sort of thing. So Parcel 5 would be figured in significantly in that conversation, and obviously that's more of an active public space.
Yeah, and
But I think to your point, we have to look at, I always say we're really great at festival urbanism here, but we need to get better at everyday urbanism.
Just chilling. The folks that want to go out there just
Right.
to have to
Yeah.
have the good time.
Yeah.
And I always put a plug in for Austin Stewart Plaza, which folks always forget about, but that's one of our newer. That's why we're
Mhm.
doing Juneteenth block party there, because we want to
Mhm.
showcase that as well. That's another great space. People always say, folks go straight to Parcel 5, and I'm like, yes, Parcel 5 is great, but don't forget about Austin Stewart too, and so the other one in Washington Square Park, which doesn't get a lot of love. So I think that this open space will allow us to address some of the things that you mentioned, and but we don't have to wait. To your point, I think we can start thinking about it now while we're doing these other things as well.
I'm glad to hear that we're thinking about it holistically as a system of green spaces downtown. So I think that's ultimately the best approach, and thinking about the character and the personality of each site. Have you heard of, I think it's People for Public Spaces. There's things that they recommend that are not expensive that we can do now to kind of start training people to use these different spaces.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw what we did with Washington Square Park last summer. Did you get a chance to check that out?
With the
we
hot
added
dog?
like the big Connect 4 games. We had those chairs.
Oh,
What are those
yeah,
chairs
yeah.
called?
Yes.
What are those fancy what are they? I always forget the name of those.
Adirondack chairs?
Yes,
Yes.
Adirondack chairs.
I did see that.
We brought in, on Thursdays, we brought in some of the food trucks.
Mhm.
That was the whole idea of, similar to what you're talking about, the place for public spaces, those folks. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Okay, two last things for me, then I'll turn it to Councilmember Smith here. In the Parks and Open Space, West River Wall, really huge price tag here of $38 million. I'd love to hear what's happening. What are the plans?
So this funding is purely for construction. We are fully funded for final design. That's largely through a New York State DOS grant. We are in final design and can be complete this fall, just awaiting construction dollars to move forward. Very similar to the phase one that was north of Ford Street along Cornhill. There's some flood wall issues there that have caused inland flooding that's now in FEMA flood mapping. There's a couple of private properties that are now incorporated in that, but as we redevelop the wall, the intent is to take those inland properties out of the floodplain, restore the flood wall protection system along the frontage from Ford Street down to Flint. You would have a restoration of the wall to match the height of that on phase one, and then naturalized shoreline going down to south to the bridge crossing to U of R, and then restoration of parkland behind the wall, and then I believe there's 13 acres of developable land that would be created behind that between the ExxonMobil cleanup, the vacuum oil cleanup, and our site restoration that's outside the parkland.
I'm so glad you asked about this one, Councilman Gruber. I mean, we should all pop the champagne once this is done. I mean, this is huge. Yeah. And if you remember, we've been talking about this West River Wall fix for years. Luckily, we got funding for it, but this is really will be a big deal for our. And it doesn't sound sexy because it's like, hey, West River Wall, but I mean, this is really gonna do some great things for us as a city.
Phase 1 was hugely successful. It looks great. Obviously, not only does it look great, but it also keeps us safe, for sure. So this phase is everything from Ford Street all the way to Flint.
All the way down to the former train bridge that goes over to U of R. So it's past Flint.
Got it. And so this is probably this is a little bit beyond the CIP scope here, but we're waiting on construction funds, but we're also waiting on some cash from ExxonMobil, not maybe us, but as part of the cleanup. Is that part of what we're waiting for, or are those things totally separate?
Those are totally separate. We can't start construction until the cleanup is done on our piece, but the cleanup has to happen first.
But we are expecting the cleanup to be done this year?
Yes, it's underway.
And for construction to start this year? Okay.
We can be ready to go to construction.
Wonderful. And my last question is just on the skate park. Looks like, so we're in the middle of phase 2 right now. Phase 2 is happening. Construction looks great. Phase 3 looks like maybe moved out a year. But are these dollars, the 1.6, pretty firm of what we're going to need?
We have applied for outside funding, the Rochester Regional Partnership, and we're waiting to hear about those dollars. And I understand we might not hear until September timeframe.
But the 1 point, so I guess between next year and the year after, it's just about $2 million. Is $2 million what we need in total to finish phase 3, roughly?
What we had in there, the phase 3 we initially envisioned was a restroom concession building to support future events on the site. We have requested funding beyond that through the grant for potential parking and other action sports related activities. Could be a pump track or other skatable features. So we're looking for a bigger picture, but the restroom building would be accomplished by the funds in the CIP.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you for that segue. Councilmember Gruber, I wanted to know in regards to the skate park, well, I have 2 questions. Is this the time to ask around about retail downtown, or is that another?
Not really CIP related, but you can ask, and if they're not ready to answer, we'll get it in writing.
Sure. Okay. So with the skate park, I wanted to know how are you guys engaging local community around the engagement of the skate park? And particularly, I am curious as to know how we are engaging folks who may not have access to like skate equipment, if we're doing anything in that space. And then I'll ask my other question after you answer that.
From the engagement part, I'll talk a little bit about Friends of the Rochester City Skate Park. They are really, really high on working on engagement, making sure people have access, educating people about what skating is. They really are some of them have aged and moved on and gotten older, but that organization was really the impetus for getting this skate park started. And I think it took, I can't even remember how many years to get this park up and running, but they are very, very engaged in terms of community outreach, encouraging people to learn to skate, encouraging people to use the space, coming up with ideas on how to bring events, how to raise money for the skate parks items to supplement the work that the city is already doing. So that organization is very much involved there. And then I would just say also the location of the skate park lends it. One of the reasons why that location is so perfect is because it's at a part of the city that everybody can get to. It's on a bus line. It abuts downtown. It's two minutes from the Central Library. So it's a space that's opening. And then the other idea that we have with the skate park is that even for those folks that don't want to skate like me, it's still, when it's all done, said and done with all the phases, it's still just going to be a cool place to just go to. There's art there. There's the murals there. So that's also part of the goal as we continue to do the phases of the skate park.
Thank you so much, and thank you for creating opportunities for our communities to engage in different activities. I am interested, however, Mayor, in being exact around the diversity that this space brings, and I don't know how we would go about getting that information, but just curious to know. My next question is really around retail downtown. I don't know if this is the appropriate space, but if not, Councilmember Gruber, you can let me know. Some of us remember downtown when it was really, thriving. We talked about, you and I the other day about All Day Sunday and all that.
Yeah, right. Midtown Plaza.
Midtown Plaza. So I'm curious as to how the administration intends to bring more of a, urban retail back downtown, get more people engaged and involved with coming downtown to shop, or just to invest and increase the footprint and traffic into our downtown areas. And I also wanted to know if you could touch on what barriers the administration believes currently prevents retailers from locating back downtown.
Yeah, I think one of the rules that we followed as it relates to, and you can kind of relate this to the CIP tangentially, is that once 10,000 people got downtown, the thought was you would get all this retail. That necessarily did not happen. I mean, we have more people living downtown than ever before. So we believe that being that we continue to create lots of housing downtown, that retail will follow. I am pleased to state, and we talked about this in some of the departmental hearings, that we are seeing a little bit of a breakthrough. We have a grocery store that's going to be coming downtown right across from Parcel 5. They're going to be opening hopefully very soon. And on the corner of Main and Clinton, which is a building that's been there since the 1800s. If you remember, that was a vibrant place that was there. It was jewelry stores. You had all types of things that were there right on the corner of Main and Clinton, now called Harper Square. Next month, a new deli is going to be there. I think one of the big barriers, though, is just the nature of how shopping has changed. And you can look at Irondequoit Mall, you can look at Marketplace Mall. So I think the type of shopping that we should be trying to attract should be unique and different, that would make people want to go to these places because it's something that they may not be able to get online and purchase from Amazon, or something that they can't get from a big box store. I think the days of us getting like big box stores downtown, I think those have passed. You may be able to attract one or two, but I think what we should go for are these unique shopping experiences that are downtown, that are cool, that are fresh, that are open, that want to make people to be able to shop there. I think an example of that right now is, for example, a place like Flower City Kicks, right? Very unique store. I can go there and get my Jordans that nobody else has, but you can't get those at some other places, but you can get them from Parcel 5 and then go across the street and get something to eat over at the Mercantile. And I think that's how we can go about attracting those types of businesses. I think we are right now at a tipping point downtown. And I think that a lot of the investments that you see in this CIP will allow us to be able to attract a lot of those businesses downtown. I mean, Main and Clinton is finally activated on all four corners, and it's the first time that it's ever been mainly activated like that for almost 30 years. I mean, you'd have to go back almost 30 years to have four corners on Main and Clinton ready to go. But I think what we're doing that's unique is that we're adding housing in a lot of that, and you never had that before. So I think our mixed use strategy will allow us to be able to attract a lot more people, and hopefully the retail will continue to be able to follow that.
Okay, we're moving over to public safety, which is 87 to 96. Open it up for questions. President Melendez.
I know for years there's been a request from fire to look at radios and radio systems. Is there any updates on that process? I know we've tried to look for state support for that.
Mr. President, I think I don't want to jinx myself. Should I say it that I think this is the year it might happen? I think I can say that. I think this is the year it may happen. I honestly think so. If it doesn't happen this year, it ain't gonna happen. But I think this is the year that it might happen. So stay tuned.
So now or never, huh?
Yeah, now or never. No, it happens to happen this year. I think this is the year.
That's it. Thanks.
Vice President Harris.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask, on page 90, you have the firefighting apparatus and allocation for 26-27, and could you explain to me what apparatus does that entail?
Where's my fire apparati? All right. There you go. Behave back there, Chief and Chiefs. All right.
Thank you for the question. We currently have a 10-year replacement schedule for fire apparatus, including engines, trucks, the utility type vehicles such as the heavy rescues, as well as water rescue units and technical rescues. This purchases the apparatus for that year based on the schedule, which would be 2 engines, I believe, for engine 16 and possibly engine 17.
Thank you for that, Chief. So I know that in the previous hearing that I did ask questions, or actually I sent email about questions about your accreditation.
CFAI, yes.
Yeah, is this attached to your accreditation schedule? You know, the recommended schedule based on accreditation?
No, it's not directly tied into that. The CFAI, and I'll be sending that over to you along with other questions that council may have. Part of the CFAI area is to ensure that we have equipment replacement schedules overall, not specifically just the fire apparatus.
Got it. Thank you. And and I know that, so if we were to purchase the fire apparatus, is there a supply chain delay with the fire apparatus as well?
Unfortunately, yes. Right now, if we placed an order today, we're looking up to almost 4 years. Yes. And
okay. I'm sorry if my wheels is turning. My wheels is turning.
Welcome to my.
So the price tag you have here may increase, right? Is that correct or no?
Well, we've entered into, we'll be entering into contracts, and right now the vendors that we're using are holding that, but they always give us the caveat that the delivered price could be higher. There's no longer performance bonds. There are no longer guarantees or penalty clauses for every day that they're late. They completely have thrown that out, and their statement is, well, if you don't want to pick up your fire truck at the end of 4 years, someone else will pick it up.
So, okay. Wow. So the other question I have is, how much is a typical, fire truck?
Okay, I'm glad you're sitting down.
And then what is the projected amount that we would expect with it increasing each year we delay the purchase? I'm just trying to get a handle on that.
So when I first came here 33 months ago or 34 months ago, an engine was $550,000, and it is now $1.2 million. A ladder truck when I got here was $1.2 million, and now it's $2.3 to $2.4 million.
That's supply chain issues, right?
Pardon me?
Supply chain issues.
Supply chain issues, and majority of the fire apparatus manufacturers, the smaller ones, were bought up by conglomerates. And so you have conglomerations that found an area that they can make significant more money.
And I'm very litigious, and as you may not have been here last time, but we do have a suit that we may be bringing related to these prices. We think that these prices are outrageous, but I mean, it is what it is. But the other point I'll make, I mean, I'm glad you asked this question. This is why I think, the Chinese, they think 100 years ahead in their planning. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing here, it may not be for us. We may not be here. It's really to make sure that other folks that come after us won't inherit dilapidated later equipment. I mean, this is really why the CIP is so important, because yes, we're talking about the now, but so much of this stuff seems so far off, but it really will benefit future residents of the city, future elected officials that will be sitting here, as those that came before us did. And that's why I think all of the budget is important, but the CIP is so very, very important, just for the reasons I think also that the chief, how long it takes to get this equipment and the cost, and just how important it is.
I just think that, and I agree with you, Mayor and Chief, that, I just wanted to put that out there, ask questions, because I want people to understand what happens when you try to kick the can down the road with public safety and what the implications could be if we continue that. That means more money out of the taxpayers' pockets, and then we may not get what we want or get what we need, right? Combination. And then the other thing is it might be ballooned so far out of our price range. So I can respect that, and I understand why it's there now. And so I'm looking at I see the cadence and how you have in here each year. So what is the so each year you have the $2 million set aside for that, and that will continue throughout the CIP. Is that the case? You said you have how many years do you have a CIP where you see that for the fire apparatus?
It's not necessarily on this worksheet, but I have this going back 27 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been doing that pretty much every 10 years for.
Yes. Well, we actually used to buy fire trucks with cash, and then they just became too expensive, and we converted to using debt to buy them.
Okay, so Mayor, we need to help you with that. Let us know what we can do to help you if you need a letter from us.
Councilmember Leslie Smith.
For our fire facilities, I see a lot of capital improvements around like roof replacement, maybe some kitchen, but not a whole lot of interior improvements to the firehouses, and just considering the amount of time that our firefighters spend in those spaces. Are all of those spaces up to par? Is this something that is perhaps missing out of this budget or needed in future budgets? Chief?
I'm going to defer to my DES colleagues, architect and engineering.
So we do have two major renovation projects that are nearing completion at the Broad and Allen Firehouse and at the Goodman Firehouse. Many of the facility projects that you see here, you noted that they are, roof replacements or restorations. Part of that is because we have discovered that if we're not preparing and restoring the roof, that the interior renovations that happen ahead will suffer.
So are you telling me that there is preparation happening now for future interior repairs to the firehouses?
Yes, I can't put a finger on it right now. I know as I was reviewing materials for the meeting that there is I believe it was Lyle Firehouse has an interior renovation that's in the queue.
Okay. So that's the Lyle Firehouse. Is there a cadence at which each of the firehouses are inspected and then determined whether or not modernization is needed for those spaces?
So there was a major fire facilities assessment report that was completed a few years ago. So that is guiding much of the current work. There is a little bit of a disconnect. This was with a previous fire chief. So we're working to reconcile the priorities when the report was completed with the current department priorities.
Can you provide us with that report?
Yes, we can get you that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Patterson.
We're just having a little too much fun down here. Not being funny, but apparently the town of Medina bought a fire truck that's too big for their firehouse. Have we, not being yeah, like really, have we had a conversation with them like, you got a truck, we got some money, we'll take it off your hands cheap?
He really wants an answer to that question.
Yeah, I really do. Like really, because you're telling me 4 years to get a truck. There's one down the street, and it's sitting in the rain. So,
yes. So we ensure our overall width, our overall heights are based on current facilities at this time. We have our specifications are extremely rigid, and that allows us to ensure, even when there's inclement weather. And there's snow building up on the ramp, a heavy piece, 78,000-pound apparatus will pack that down and artificially raise the height and build it with ice. So we ensure that we have enough tolerance for all weather and that our apparatus just doesn't fit in one facility it has to fit in all facilities, as we talked about yesterday, apparatus being rotated to cover other districts. So we are very stringent on our overall height, our overall width, and in many cases, overall length, because some fire stations aren't as deep as other ones. So yeah, we make sure that we don't get ourselves into any type of situation similar to my colleagues in Medina.
Just to add to that, as you may recall, this is why we work in partnership with the fire department and all the departments in architectural services. We worked in hand with fire department because they knew ahead of time that this was happening with the fire trucks, that they were getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So several years ago, as you may recall in the CIP, we started a project where we started raising some of the heights of some of the entrances of our firehouses. So we foresaw this. So most of our firehouses are now at scale for the type of fire trucks that are now coming into service. So this is not a problem we have for the city of Rochester. It's happening in some other municipalities, as you see, but we foresaw this, and so it was a project that was done years ago. So we're in pretty good shape for our firehouses.
Your answers were actually better than the question that I asked. So the question I asked was, hey, there's a fire truck down the street. Have we been down there to find out?
He just wants to know
if
if
we
anyone
can make a deal.
Did anyone offer
will it
cash
fit?
for this fire truck?
Yeah, can we make a deal? Can we do this? Can we buy a truck? That was the question.
I will tell you, as soon as I saw that story, I texted the chief. So
okay,
let's get on it.
So you'll get back to me in writing?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Any further questions on public safety? Councilmember Martin.
This can be in writing. Just how many patrol rifles I see every year? There's 7,000 allocated. Just why you need to get more every year. That can be in writing. And thank you.
Very good.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move over to to transportation infrastructure, page 97 to 106. I'm going to start with a couple questions. I see we're putting in $1.1 million for railroad underpass safety improvements. Greatly appreciate that. I think every time that we see some attention spent on the railroad underpasses, it pays dividends for safety, beautification, etc. Can you share the plan for this $1.1 million? Are there specific underpasses targeted?
Yes, that's for Winton Road underpass.
For Clinton?
Winton. Yes.
Winton where?
It's south of Atlantic, I believe.
Oh, okay. So the whole.
I'm sorry, north.
Yeah. I know. The whole 1.1 million will go there.
Yes.
Wow. These are expensive projects. Okay. I want to ask a question, and Commissioner Okanse, I'll direct it to you, but it may very well be something that David pinch hits for. There's a lot of Safe Streets for All stuff in here, and I just want a sense, if you can give a full overview of the money that has come in from the federal government for Safe Streets, the different initiatives it's being spent on, and timelines. And if you'd rather follow up in writing, you can, but I just want to give you an opportunity to share what can be shared.
Yeah, I think we should share a little bit here, but we'll give you a full recap through writing.
Yeah, so myself and David Riley are going to tackle this one together.
Yeah.
So there's, I guess, several entries in here. So the Safe Streets for All, what you see in here, the total $13.875 million. That is for multiple street projects. So one of which is North Clinton Avenue. We've got Lexington Avenue in there, Shiloh Avenue, and East Main Street. So these are major street improvement projects. There's also some planning funds, planning type projects and demonstration projects that are managed out of David's group now, so he can speak to those.
Yeah, there are 4 different projects covered with that grant that we're managing. One is a protected bicycle lanes demonstration project. So we're looking at materials that we haven't traditionally used here, but that we know some other cities are using, that can create separation between bicycle lanes and motor vehicle travel lanes. and are a little bit easier to put in, take out, and aren't as high maintenance or costly as some other materials. So we'll be trialing those on 4 different streets throughout the city. We're planning to bid that project later this year and construct it next year. And that'll be in place for a year, and we'll see how the materials hold up and what lessons we can learn. There are 3 planning projects as well. One is to develop pedestrian safety plans for about 24 areas around the city. We're focusing on places around schools, recreation centers, libraries, senior housing, places where we know there are large numbers of pedestrians and vulnerable pedestrians, kids, seniors. We'll be doing walk audits actually starting this summer with neighborhood groups to walk around with people who live in these neighborhoods to tell us what the issues are that they see and start working with them to brainstorm solutions. The other 2 planning projects are looking at winter maintenance. So we're working closely with our operations group on that and looking at, we already do a lot in the winter to try to clear sidewalks of ice and snow. But if we were to do more with, say, bicycle facilities that are off-street or trails or other kinds of facilities that aren't necessarily maintained throughout the winter, what would it take to do that in terms of equipment, in terms of personnel? And the final study is looking at our bike spine network. That was a recommendation that came out of our active transportation plan a few years ago. It's a plan basically to tell us how we can implement it relatively quickly and efficiently so that we're not looking at talking about how we're doing on the spine network in another 20 years.
Thanks. And I would note all of those are critical elements of Vision Zero, which is why it's exciting to hear about all the things happening. I am a little confused about the money, though. So, Dominic, is what you said that the 4 corridors is that 13.875 on page 103?
Yes, so the Safe Streets for All federal funding, which is not shown here, I believe was allocated in last year's CIP, $23.7 million. It did take a while for the grant to get executed. It has been executed now. The funding you see here is a local match and then some. The Safe Streets for All program does not fund all improvements that a normal, typical federally funded street improvement project would cover. So, for example, resurfacing the street is not eligible for those funds. And so it's one of the reasons why you see a very large local share listed here, but it is covering many projects, those funds.
Got it. So the Safe Streets for All bucket is this almost $14 million plus the $24 million that we have already received from the feds.
That's correct.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Other council members, questions on transportation infrastructure? Councilmember Monroe.
This is just a comment, not necessarily for the capital plan, but as many of you might know, there was a fiery crash, 1 dead on Lake Avenue after state troopers did a chase from Hudson Avenue all the way over to Lake Avenue. The suspect that they were chasing hit another car, 3 people in a Jeep. And first, obviously, we need to do something about sheriffs and troopers doing that. But as we talk about safety and, problems on Lake Avenue, boy, this really is a horrible example of what's happening on the streets. So I do appreciate everything that we're trying to do to make it safer. Thanks.
President Melendez.
Yes, so for Rock Vision Zero, there's a $100,000 allocation in this upcoming year. Do we have any sense of what that, it just says high priority Rock Vision Zero initiatives. Do you have any sense of what that might look like this year?
One thing that we are looking at is one of the priority actions for Vision Zero is to consider lowering the city speed limit to 25 miles per hour. And by state law, we have to do an engineering assessment or investigation of what that would entail. So we have to look at speeds on existing streets, traffic volumes, think about what speed limits make sense on them. And that is certainly one thing, not the only thing that could potentially be funded out of that pot of funding.
Got it. So it's really to have some resources available to explore some of the options that are being considered.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Just for clarity, you may have said this, and I didn't hear you, but in my neighborhood, we have lots of trees that tend to lift up the sidewalk. How should constituents, do they just call 311 to report if they see a tree? Like in front of my house, for example, I have large trees that sometimes get into the sewer system as well as lift up the sidewalk. How should constituents report that information?
Yes, 311 is the best way.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, also, before you joined council, we voted for the renovations that you see that are happening outside of City Hall right now. That was the result of trees lifting up the bricks. And we had our seniors coming into City Hall and other folks to pay their bills. This is why that project that you see outside of City Hall right now, part of the reason for that, other reasons as well, was you had the bricks coming up from trees that were lifted.
Councilmember Leslie Smith.
On page 106, we talk about traffic calming safety improvements. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those pieces are? I see here speed humps, bump outs, medians, striping. Does this include any equipment that has been talked about in any of our Vision Zero meetings around red light cameras or anything like that?
No, it does not.
Thank you.
Project Uplift. How is it different from just a regular street lighting program? What's different about it? Or is there anything different about it?
So our traditional street lighting program is to maintain the lighting. Uplift is for any enhancements such as upgrades to, say, LEDs or any deficiencies in the neighborhood which a resident may inquire about. We'll do our analysis and then make a decision based off that.
Got it. And I'm sure, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but obviously a lot of, when we first started moving over to the LEDs, there were a number of neighborhoods that complained about the brightness or the dimness. And at this point, all those things can be controlled by DES, correct?
Correct. Most of the things can be controlled. As you can see in the budget as well, there was allocation that was deferred this year, but that one was for LED luminaire and pole replacements. But a lot of these new luminaires we're integrating lighting controls into, so we have the ability to dim, turn them on and off. We can view them remotely and things of that nature.
Wonderful. Any final questions, Councilmember Monroe?
So when we're talking about our residential streets, is it complaint driven for someone to ask for a review of the number of streetlights on their street?
So typically, constituent sends a request to 311, and we review the photometrics, foot candle levels, and uniformity on the street, and we would determine if it warrants a additional light or any changes based off our photometric analysis, which reviews uniformity and foot candle levels. We compare it to IES standards.
And then as part of street lighting's regular maintenance, then are we able to review and have an inventory of the number of lights on our streets? Certainly, I mean, I've noticed that there are streets that have fewer lights and are darker, especially in the southern end of the Northwest. I've seen that on a lot of those streets.
So every street is kind of unique in its own fashion, based off trees. Oftentimes we have our own infrastructure, and other times we utilize Argini wood poles just to minimize the congestion in the right of way. So every case is different. So if you have any direct street, you could email me directly or you could submit it through 311. We will assess it.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, last but not least, water system, page 107. I'll open it up. President Melendez.
Yes, thank you. Page 110, looking at lead service replacements, we have a $10 million allocation from New York State in 26-27, and then another $14 million in 27-28. How close does that get us, or how much further do we have to go? Because I see we don't have any tentative allocations in the out years yet for lead line replacements, and just want to get a sense of how close this gets us to completion.
So earlier this week, we actually submitted our 5th project listing on the New York State intended use plan for lead service replacements. If we're awarded through that year 5, we will have secured enough funding to replace all of the lead in the city. We are currently waiting on year 4. That announcement should come out this year, and then we would expect an announcement about year 5 next year. Based off of our track record, we are very optimistic we will get those awards.
And when we say year 5, what does that mean in calendar years in terms of when we'd be looking to, when would year 5 hit us?
So we had some initial delays in getting those projects off the ground as we evaluated the actual programmatic requirements and paperwork needs for the state and feds. So the first year of federal funding was called FY22, and we started construction on that this year. We have also started construction on the FY23 award this year and plan on issuing contracts for the FY24 award year this year as well. So year 4 and year 5, we would be looking to potentially start construction, depending on award, in either 28, 29 time frame in order to meet our goal of lead-free by 2030.
Great. And water meter replacement program. CIP has replacement and modernization of water meters. Smaller allocation in next year's budget, but then a consistent almost $900,000 per year moving forward. Is this a standard process, or how does one qualify or request a water meter replacement?
So typically, during normal maintenance and repair activities, if a water meter stops functioning, our team will go out and replace it. As part of our modernization efforts, we have been targeting older meters that were still functioning, but have replaced them with these radio read capable meters that allow us to collect the reads through mobile collection units and no longer require meter readers to travel house to house to collect those reads. They also include new analytics like leak flags that allow us better tools to alert our customers about their usage. We're about 90% of our system converted. The drop in this year's funding was offset by some previous grant funds, which we are also seeking again in the future.
Got it. So how does one know if they are going to get a new meter? Is it something that your team reaches out to?
So yes, we do targeted outreach, route by route. There are a few routes left, and that is scheduled with the customer to find a time that works for them.
Great.
So it's not a request process, but certainly any meter that is not functioning, we go out and replace.
Thank you.
Any additional water questions? Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. I live not too far from Seneca Park, and I received a letter around finding lead inside of our water. Can you tell me what the process is for residents when we receive one of those letters? What happens after that, and what is the follow-up to residents?
So those letters were a regulatory requirement for us to send out to inform people as part of the lead and copper rule about what their service inventory or what their home is served by, basically. There's no action required by the public. We are programming all these lead services in, trying to do it in the most efficient manner possible through putting together project areas, all, a street at a time, so to speak. So unfortunately, that does mean scheduling, and some people end up in the schedule later than others. But as part of our lead-free by 2030 plan, we do intend to replace all of those through one of our projects.
Thank you. I think just for clarification, my mom stopped us from drinking water in the 90s, so we've been buying water for a long time. But I'm thinking about some of our residents who, I don't know, may not know. I'm just trying to figure out how do we, I know we send the letters out, but I'm trying to make sure, like, how do residents know how long it lasts? Like, how, because they ask you to boil water or to,
So one thing to clarify is these changes in the rules have not changed anything about our water supply or our water quality. It's what we're required to report to the public and let you know what's going on. So I drink the water out of the tap. But if there are concerns about any individual constituent, we would encourage them to call our water test water test hotline, or send an email to watertest@cityofrochester.gov, request a test, see what your lead levels are, and we also offer free water filter pitcher distribution to help minimize those potential impacts until we're able to get out there and do a replacement. If we do detect high levels of lead, we will program in an immediate replacement. 311 will get you to that.
Mary, you're going to add something about, because I just want to note that the letters don't mean that people have an unsafe amount of lead.
Right. Yeah. I was just gonna say
it's a reporting it's a reporting requirement, but it's not about unsafe levels.
Right. It doesn't mean it's unsafe. And then I would add too, one of the things I tried to do when we first started doing the lead service line replacements is I would actually drink water out of the tap to show folks that it was like okay, because you're right. A lot of people are like, wait a minute. And then also when we were doing like lead service line replacements, people were like, wait a minute, does that mean I can't drink the water anymore? That's why the education component was so very, very important, because they see what was happening in Flint and Jackson and a lot of these other places. Luckily for Rochester, we did not have those problems, but by law, we do have to let people know what's happening. The other thing I pointed out to folks, and we did I think Councilmember Gruber did this with me. Mitch, did we do this last year? Last year. We did basically a water seminar about Rochester's water, highlighting how we've gotten awards for our water actually, and encouraging people to ask questions if they had questions about water, but also to know that our drinking water is safe and it's okay to drink.
And that letter was not just City of Rochester; that was also Monroe County too. So everybody in this community, the state, had received the same letter.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear from the administration for clarity that the water is safe to drink. And
sure is, and it's delicious. Nick, quick question: what is the increased upland service charge paid to other governments?
So if you're referring back to the operating budget change, that is our purchases of water from MCWA. We have an exchange agreement with them where we buy and sell water back and forth every day, and that's just recognizing the increasing costs of those purchases.
Got it. Okay, are there any further final questions on water? I'm going to close with one general question, and then I will turn it to anyone else if they have any. There's nothing in here other than in obviously the beginning section about big picture items about Interloop North. So, Mayor, I just want to ask. I think there's some confidence that this project is moving forward. Can you give a high level overview of what's happening?
He's a former reporter,
I do.
We trust him now, though.
I
came to
do.
the right side.
It's an increasingly long time ago. Yes, we continue to coordinate closely with the New York State DOT, which is funding the design process that's underway now, and with the Federal Highway Administration. So I'm sure council members know the city was awarded a $100 million federal grant in early 2025. Shortly before the administration changed. We have been working with DOT and the feds to sort of understand what the direction with that funding might be based on the current administration's priorities. Happily, we have been sent a draft grant agreement from the Federal Highway Administration recently, and we've been talking with them and the state DOT about what that would entail, how it might affect project schedule at this point. But we are actively working through that with them now. So we don't have a lot of firm updates on timeline, but we should pretty shortly.
So in theory, I'm not at the page right now, but in the big, what do you call this section? The yet to be funded items.
Mm-hmm.
The major projects in need of funding. So Interloop North has a total cost of $223 million. So if once we have dry ink there, how much of the 223 is in hand?
Approximately $200 million would be secured through the federal grant, and then there would the state has committed funding and allocates it depending on the phase of design. So that's sort of budgeted, but not necessarily under agreement.
Got it.
And we're looking to try to get another hot $25 million imminently.
That'd be good, because probably when we look next year, the cost is going to be, based on the conversations today, $300 million.
You better believe it.
So, sounds good. Any final questions from folks on CIP? If not, thank you all very much for your time today. Much appreciated. Council members, let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll start ours at 3:40. 3:40. All right, we're going to get started in a minute here. Commissioner Green, you don't want to hang out for our last. Oh. So we are going to close this year's budget hearings with our own section. We'll go in this order: council, clerk, PAB. So to that end, I will open it by asking President Melendez to share anything he wants. We'll talk. I'll offer Clerk Washington the same opportunity, and then we'll turn it over to Director Myers-Small. President Melendez.
Yes, thank you. Well, first and foremost, to my colleagues, I want to start by thanking the staff. And by staff, we should all stand, yes. And by staff, I mean all staff in all three bureaus that are in the council clerk PAB office. To the chief of staff, deputy chief of staff for council, all of the staff members, the budget analysis that was provided this year to us was tremendous. I know it's a lot of work to pull all of this together. I saw some staff members that shall remain nameless here way later than I would anticipate them to be, just working on this and making sure that council has everything that they need to be successful in our hearing process. And then to the clerk's office, I want to say that there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes all the time that the general public does not get to see. And many hours that are spent preparing records and preparing work for this body, preparing binders, information, things that we need to be successful in this role. And we would not be successful if we did not have a good back of house in the clerk's office. So we really appreciate your leadership, Clerk Washington, and everyone on the team. And finally, Dr. Myers-Small, I just want to say to you and your leadership team at the PAB, it's been a pleasure working with you in our time together. And I appreciate the work that you've done to present a proposal to the council. And I look forward to hearing about the next steps as proposed by your bureau in our department. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief of Staff Smith to kind of kick off the council section.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, members of council. As has been the theme throughout the entire budget process and budget hearings, our department, like the rest of city government, is predominantly made up of people. And it's the people that drive the budget, obviously, because of salaries and other expense. So before I get too far into it, I do want to take a moment to introduce our people very quickly, particularly given the amount of effort and time that they put into the document that you've been using as part of the budget analysis. As the president had said, we have two policy legislative assistants who you're very familiar with. Adrian Davis, who supports the PPPW committee under the leadership of Council Member Monroe, and also supports the Neighborhoods, Jobs, and Housing Committee under the leadership of Councilmember Patterson. Our second LA in the policy area is Dassy Kimingio, who staffs the Business, Finance, and Governance Committee under Councilmember Gruber, and also the Public Safety Committee under Councilmember Vice President Harris. These two folks, I'm starting with them for a reason. They are the folks who are policy experts. They've built up this amazing expertise over time from staffing your committees on a monthly basis, and that's reflected very much in this book. In addition to our legislative assistants, we have a fantastic executive assistant to City Council, bilingual, which is her title, Kelly Munoz-Miles. She does a lot more than the average admin in city government, as she does our munis and other things, and also an enormous amount of work on the member items that you all put forward. Also, our legislative communications coordinator, Aiden Pollard. He makes all of our collateral things look good by doing a great job on graphic design and other things, and helps us package, but also does social media and other media outreach. And we have a new position, new to us, in this budget, but not new to us as part of the family. In our legislative part-time aide, Marion Grant Smith. Marion's home watching. She's been texting us, telling people to speak into their mics because she can't hear them. So we want to say hello to Marion at home. And then, and last but certainly not least, Deputy Chief of Staff Jen Bideman. Jen has been an incredible force of nature in getting this done this year, and has shown great leadership. But I want to actually acknowledge her just really briefly for last year. Last year I wasn't here. I missed this great fun of the budget hearings because I was out on a medical leave after an accident. And Jen took on an enormous amount of work to get it all done last year and made this year that much easier for her efforts. So that's our team. And like I said, like every other part of city government, what we do is predicated on an incredible group of people. I think we're first among equals, I guess, as it comes to the rest of the city government. A couple of budget highlights for you, and of course the first one, as I lead with, are associated to staffing. As I mentioned, we did add the one part-time legislative aide that has been assigned to helping with scheduling, and I hope you've noticed a difference in that and that it's made things smoother. Additionally, our third legislative assistant position was abolished, and that position was downgraded to an associate legislative assistant, and that position will be doing more. Certainly continuing to do the work in the area of community engagement, but it reflects a realignment in that we're looking to support a more targeted grassroots approach to constituent outreach and more direct engagement with residents and neighborhood associations, et cetera. I have been assured that we will be able to fill that position very soon by HR. Additionally, you'll see the legal counsel position, which I know you're all very familiar with. That position has been eliminated from our budget. However, I don't think that's the end of the story as it relates to having legal counsel to council, because the funds were redirected to our PSA line. So we will be able to maybe find a more creative way to engage someone to assist us with legal counsel, but doing it through a professional services agreement potentially. So that outlines the changes in the council staffing. There's a few changes in what we're doing with our KPIs. I found a best practice when I was in communications was to get the staff to be a part of any changes and recommendations to KPIs. We did an exercise with the staff making some recommendations, one of which was we have in the past we have counted the number of budget hearing participants. As you notice, it's basically all administration. So we wanted to eliminate that and create a new KPI related to formal legislative inquiries, tracking what you guys are asking here as council members, so we can reflect that to constituents to show the work that you're doing on their behalf as part of the legislative process. We also were removing a KPI about speak to council attendance. It was just a very one-dimensional KPI, replacing that with one that focused on community engagement. We'll continue to track the number of participants that speak to council, but also track the number of community engagement events that we engage in and how many people we engage as a part of that. Also, we are adding tracking memorializing resolutions, which you all know have become a bigger part of what we do and a nice tool for you to do more advocacy work. So we're adding that to letters of recommendation, which we've always tracked. And we're also going to be creating a new KPI related to council briefings, so we can track the number of events that council holds and participates in order to be briefed on important issues, whether that's a formal briefing from the administration, from an outside group, or also during the committee meeting process. So that's it. Hopefully that answers questions, and certainly if there are more, we'll be happy to get into those as well.
I'll open it up to the whole group. It seems like there's many questions, so let's start on the left and come down. Council Vice President.
Thank you, Chair Gruber. I really am very happy that you have made the revisions to the KPIs, and I do like the KPIs that you have there. I just have one, maybe just a request. You see how this is broken down? Is there a way that maybe you can take some key KPIs and break them down in a pie chart like this?
Staff knows I'm a huge fan of infographics, and that's driving that. And I must have learned that from former Councilmember Lightfoot. So yeah, we'll gladly try and do some of that for you.
Yeah, I mean, I understand this is already done, but maybe something that we can, see periodically so we can keep track of it. It's really helpful, and I love that you guys put this together with all that data in there. So, as a data junkie, I like having it in pie charts too and
Awesome.
infographics.
Yep. You heard that, Aiden.
Thank you for that overview. You might have stated this and I potentially missed it, but the KPI for KPI 8 budget hearing participants was removed for 26-27. Can you share about that?
Yeah, so I think initially the idea was that would include maybe public participation, but in the end, it's largely driven by a count of the number of administration and city employees that participate in these hearings, and so it became a measure that didn't really measure anything all that relevant. And so we thought we could do something a little different that would be more relevant to you and also to the citizens to kind of get a sense of what goes on with the budget process.
Thank you for that clarification. And one more question. I did not see any KPIs around professional development, and this probably is a question more for my colleagues. I know myself as a newly elected official, outside of know before, which Kelly, I'm going to get that, I promise. There's so much to understand about our fiscal responsibility here as managers of the city. I'm wondering if that's something we should be thinking about. I know, we can attend various conferences, but if there's a collective goal that we as elected officials can achieve or aspire to, I think that would make a lot of sense and probably make us better servants of the city of Rochester.
Be happy to kick that around with staff and also to engage council members in that as well.
I want to know about the status update of our legislation management system.
So I was going to mention that in my overview, but you texted me and said you were going to be asking, so I thought I would let you ask. So we're in a good place, I believe, with that. We're working very closely, I should say, with the PMO too. That's been a very good experience, and they've been very helpful. We're now in the discovery phase with our vendor, and the estimated timeline of adoption is Q2 or Q3 of the upcoming budget, so in the fiscal year. And I think that's a very realistic timeline. We've been working really closely on the implementation with the clerk and also with the liaison to council on the administration side. And as you know, Clerk Washington, who's going to tell you more about that, has some changes in her office coming. So we're trying to be realistic and understanding that we want to make sure the implementation includes the new deputy clerk and that we're being realistic. So we seem to be on a good track. There's a great team working on it. Jen is heading up the effort on our side, and I know Hazel has been increasingly more and more involved. And again, like I said, the administration as well has been, I think, really on the implementation part, has really got much more engaged. So it's been going well, and that's what we expect for implementation is Q2, Q3.
That's great. I have 2 follow-ups. Is administration, I guess, to what degree is administration implementing the system on the legislative side?
Yeah, so I think initially they were, I don't want to speak for the administration, but I will say this. I think initially they were a little hesitant to maybe use the LMS system on the upfront, on their side of it, and that it would more be an interface with what we do on our part of it. But I think that's changed because I think they recognize that it offers a lot of really good opportunity for them as well. So we think that's going well, and I asked these guys, is that fair, you think, as well, Hazel? Yes, we agree. So things are going well, and the administration seems to be very interested in getting more involved with the LMS.
That's good to hear. Come Q2 or Q3, have you given much thought to how we're going to roll it out to the public and have them be aware of the new capabilities?
I think we need to develop that a little bit more, but certainly we'd be interested in doing some good, bringing some good attention to it and spending some time. I think that's part of how the system will be successful, is making sure that people are aware that it exists. And those folks have been frustrated in the past with trying to navigate our online presence because it's been difficult to navigate. Making sure that they know it will be better going forward.
That's great.
We'll promote it.
Good. Are we doing PAB now or waiting?
Yeah, I don't have questions because I obviously have seen this for some time. But the one point of clarification I want to make sure this body is aware of with the legal counsel position elimination. So in eliminating that position but retaining the funds in PSA, it's going to offer us some flexibility with what we want to do. If it's this council's desire at some point to restore a position like that into a full-time position, we will have the ability to do that, and it would start off as a temporary, and then we would put it in next year's budget. But by giving us the money still in the budget and in the PSA line, it also gives us the ability to pivot if we decide that we want to use those funds by getting a retainer or some outside legal support for some other reason. So I just wanted to make that point of clarification in addition to what Chief of Staff Smith already mentioned. So it really does give us a little bit more flexibility. Thanks.
First of all, thank you so much to all the staff. I mean, just the incredible work you do. This budget analysis for the RCSD and the City Council you do is so incredible, just how responsive you've been. I'm just truly grateful to have each of you, and thank you. I have a few questions, of course, about process, because that's my major issue I've had on this body. So can folks walk me through, I guess it would be Council President and James. Council President, you said obviously you've seen this budget for some time. I'm wondering how the decisions were made around the changes. At what point did you involve council members in discussing or making these changes? And this has been a question I've asked every single year. We're now in year 5, and I'm still seeing a budget representing my agency, essentially, and I had little to no input in it.
Sure, I could start, and Chief of Staff or anyone else can chime in. So typically what happens in our department is each of the 3 bureau heads gets a maintenance of effort number. So the OMB office will tell us, here is the number for this year for your department. And as a council member, what I do is rely on the staff to come up with their proposals for the department based on what the recommendation overall is. At some point, and it's usually around, I want to say February, we have a department submission. So the 3 department heads, or bureau heads, I should say, so Chief of Staff, the clerk, and our PAB executive director will submit their components, and largely what happens is the Deputy Chief of Staff will work to provide all the forms that we have to do in our budget department. I forget all the names of the forms, C2 forms, there's a bunch of forms that we have to submit. And I get a glimpse of it at that point and just say, I don't have concerns or I do have concerns, and then it gets submitted. After that process, there is a review by the administration. There's back and forth with OMB. At some point, there's a meeting with the mayor on our departmental budget where we present what we are proposing. Sometimes the administration comes back with their own suggestions to our department on what should or should not be, or recommended what should or should not be cut. And from there, we get into the submission for the actual budget book. My role is not to make a ton of decisions. My role is to navigate it, make sure that we get everything in. I think, as you can see, for the most part, particularly in the council and clerk side of it, the budget is the budget, and it's been the budget for several years. We did a budget survey. We got some feedback from there on what council members were interested in. There wasn't a major consensus on making overarching changes in that budget survey. So, I mean, I'm open to what should change about that process, but that essentially is soup to nuts how it goes. So in January, around January, probably mid-month, we receive those forms, and then by mid-February, say Valentine's Day, they have to be submitted.
Thank you. And So through January till when the budget was released in May 14th, right? It sounds like there was a lot of time and opportunity to involve us, to ask us about what we thought about any of the changes to the KPIs, whether we thought that Speak to Council and the amount of attendees was important to keep track of. But that didn't happen. And I think for me, I'm just trying to understand why. Every single budget year I've been here, I ask this question. I ask to be involved. We start off each new year, we say things will be different, and I'm just concerned that this process is repeating itself. I'm not in support of some of these new changes, and I would like to have had the opportunity to talk to you and talk to my colleagues about what we would like to see as a measure of how we're doing as a council. So I just, very respectfully, I just want to understand what could be done differently as we are all dedicated to collaborating and being better.
Chief of Staff, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I mean, on January 20th, we did send out a survey specifically asking for what changes you might want to see in KPIs and a lot of other things. So we asked council for that input as I think we normally do every year. That was sent out on January 20th. Additionally, one of the things you just said about how we're not tracking participants in the Speak to Council, that's not true. Before we only tracked that, and so now we created a new KPI that was based on staff input that will continue to track as part of that larger metric the number of participants in Speak to Council. So we're not removing that. But what we did do with the KPIs, that was an exercise with staff where we just thought we could improve what we were already doing. But we did send a survey out to council members on January 20th, and in that we did ask for changes to KPIs or any other changes you might want to see in any of our budgets. At the time, the survey asked for the central staff, the clerk, and also PAB, and any changes that you might want to see. So we do that every year, and we do want to get your input, and we take as much input as we can. I will say this though, when I started with council, the big change was one of the reasons that I was hired was to create a new staffing model. Since then, our budget really is, because it's about people. It's not like we're operating fire trucks or we have big budgets for fuel or anything. It's people. So year in and year out, our budgets, and I think I'm also speaking for Hazel and also for Leslie, our budgets are often second versus same as the first. It's really maintaining those folks, and we don't see a lot of changes. In this budget, we did make some staffing changes, which I did advise council of last fall. And those changes that we made then under the current fiscal year that we're winding down, those changes have now been obviously codified in the new budget. What we announced last fall are what is built in this budget. So we tried to be very, very open about those things and make sure that council was aware. But I'd certainly be happy to take any direction from the president to do more or to change up what we do. I think we're certainly open to that, and appreciate you wanting to, take as much of an interest in the budget, as you do. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say, again, appreciate all of you and the work you do, but I think to grow, we have to be able to respectfully offer critique and have discussion. Sending out a survey that's primarily about the administration's budget and the letter we sent to him is not the same as intentionally sitting down, having a conversation about changes to our key performance indicators, having changes to removing a whole entire legal counsel position. It's just not the same, right? There should be an opportunity between January to May when you meet with the administration. We should know about it as a body. We should be allowed to sit in and have those discussions with the administration. It's our budget, right? We don't have a supervisor. We're all duly elected. So if you have access to information earlier about the budget, we all as a council should have that access. I did not know that certain things would be happening till I read the budget in May. And if I did, I would have had conversations and shared my opinions about it. So what I'm asking for is changing how things are done. In January, when the administration reaches out, or when you have those meetings, it should be open to council members who want to attend, right? So that's what I'm asking for, to be included. It's not a secret. I think we should all have a say. I think we should all have a say around key performance indicators. We should have a say around how much we're allocated for training and what changes we need to see. We should have a say in staff changes. So I'm asking, again, on the record, this is my 5th year, to be included in the budgeting for my bureau. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Councilmember Martin, if you could, I think this would be helpful to us. If you could put your suggestion in terms of, from a process standpoint, what you think is an ideal situation in writing, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilmember Monroe.
I appreciated the comments that Councilmember Leslie Smith was talking about in regards to the professional development. So looking into that as far as, thinking about greater things that we might be looking at kind of together, and then also to share, especially with the new members, information about our ability to be able to go to conferences and things like that. So the funding and how we find things out. You answered the questions that I had written down here, and I thank you all for your support. Thanks.
Councilmember Patterson. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. And thank you to you guys who have been so helpful. As a new council member, it's really helpful to have access to you guys at all times. I text James about some of the smallest things, and I know, thank you to Dassy and Adrian in particular, because a lot of questions I was able to go to them directly and get clarification on. Kelly, Miss Hazel, I go into her office all the time for a hug or for candy. So thank you guys so much for all the support that you've given. I didn't realize that council had an actual budget and that it came. Thank you. We've been sharing. I didn't realize that council had an actual budget. So could you explain to me, and for residents who may not, totally understand how local government operates, can you explain how city council budget works, what it funds, and how those dollars directly support residents? I'm not sure if that.
Sure. So what the way the central staff budget works is we support kind of this operation, right? So what council does, we support analysis of the budget. We do, as you know, analysis every cycle, supporting analysis for committee chairs and committee members for the legislation that runs through the committee cycle, as well as the legislation that comes to the full council meeting at the end of that cycle. We also help put together work sessions and council presentations. We've staffed to support public engagement, public hearings. We've also supported hearings that are held through council committees and also other outreach. So we're kind of here to do all the things to support council to be able to engage the public. And I think the budget supports what you would expect, especially as we sat through the past 3 days of hearings. It supports salaries to make sure that we have the staffing that we do have, and we're able to support that staffing model to provide those services to council. As you know, Kelly, for instance, is our administrative staff member, does a lot to support the member item grants that you all put forward to support community organizations and other good works in the community, which takes quite a bit of work. And I can't tell you what a great job Kelly does. It makes it so easy. Kelly and I'll sit down some mornings and talk about where we're at with things, and she's got it all figured out. She's just really incredibly good at that. So that's what we do. We're the our budget's a little different. I mean, it's not like we're plowing roads or picking up garbage, right? Or rolling fire trucks to fires. We're here to support you in this department, if you will, of city government, which is a little unusual, right? Because we don't fall under the administration. We're not in the executive side of it. We're the one group that sits under council and provides support to you.
Thank you. Another question for clarification. Who's responsible for administering the city council budget on a day-to-day basis? Is it managed by city council leadership, council staff, the clerk's office, finance, or some other?
Oh, no, on a daily basis. I mean, so Kelly manages the Munis system. I always want to call it the Muniz system since it's Kelly Muniz, but she works in the Munis system to make sure we're able to submit contracts that support the department, as well as commodities that we might buy, whether pens, paper clips, whatever. And additionally, it's my job and Jen's job to oversee the council central staff's budget, and we do that under the direction and leadership of President Melendez. Again, I don't want to speak for her, but I think it's safe to say, in this case, Hazel does the same thing for the clerk side, and again under the president. And Leslie Meyer-Small does the same as well on the PAB component.
Okay, I just have two quick questions. If City Council generates budget savings or underruns during the year, who determines how those funds are used, and what role does the full legislative body play in that decision-making process? I think that's sort of like in alignment with Stanley Martin. I'm sorry, council member.
So that question depends, right? So sometimes departments have underruns and they have a surplus at the end of the year.
How do we get underruns?
So like for instance, a great way to explain an underrun is we had a funded position for a counsel to counsel, right? The lawyer to counsel, and that position wasn't filled. So those dollars that were funded never were spent, right? We never had payroll going out, so that money wasn't spent, and therefore we had an underrun. And additionally, other things like you budget for X amount for pens, and you don't buy as many pens, and so you have money left over in that regard as well. One of the things that can happen is it at the end of the fiscal year, those dollars could return to the general fund and help the city at the end of when the books are all closed, with dealing with their as the whole entity of the city, with dealing with budget gaps and things, and being able to put money back into reserves in the general fund. Or council has in the past done resolutions of budgetary intent where they might designate some of those dollars that are left to go to certain purposes as designated by council. So you would then direct like where that would go. And that would be up to the city council, typically done at the time of the budget passage.
Thank you. Last question is follow up for Council Member Mary Lupian. So has staff been trained on the legislative management software, and if not, when do you anticipate that will happen?
So we're in implementation right now. So we're working with the vendor to kind of figure out the particulars of how this whole thing is going to look. And kind of setting it up, customizing and setting the system up for our needs. And by our needs, I mean the whole needs of not just the central staff, but really more significantly the clerks, the clerk staff, and now, as I said, also with the administration participating in that as well. So once we get through that process, actually, I'm going to have Jen answer this because she's really the point person. I think she could do a better job at telling you about that part of implementation.
Hi. So right now we are in that discovery phase right now where Granicus, our selected vendor, through the RFP process, is learning about all of our work and building out the platform to meet our needs. And so we have spent a lot of time, the clerk's office, myself, and most recently the administration, talking about exactly what we need, what our current processes are, what we would need out of a system, where our potential hangups might be in using a system like this. And so that has been the current work that we are looking to finalize, hopefully towards the end of the summer. And then Granicus will build out basically a test platform for us, and we'll be able to go back and forth, give our feedback, and at that point there would be training. So we're hoping by late fall, staff will start getting that kind of testing back and forth to see if it meets the needs that we have requested them to build for us. And like I said, going along that timeline from there.
Thank you. We'll turn it over to the clerk's office. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Monroe, you had one additional question.
Yes, I just had some follow-up questions for the LMS. So are there elements that are going to be just internal facing and external facing? Okay. Also, will this allow us to create our annual proceedings book?
Well, we sent out a couple of RFPs for vendors, and we only order like 70 books. or 35 to 70 books each year. So we do have a few vendors that responded this week.
Now, will they be, once we have the LMS in place, will they be drawing that information off of that digitally, or will there be a separate process that the clerk's office will have to follow to get them that information?
Currently, General Code has been producing our index for us, so that's been a significant help for us. So the only challenge that we've been having since that started was to find a printer to print the books. So hopefully we have that resolved now, and I'm hoping that this new MNS, whatever it is, legislative management system, will improve and add to that process.
And I haven't gone on to see General Code recently. The indexing, does the index gather all the information from previous proceedings, or do you have to look it up year by year if you're looking for subject matter?
Currently, it's year by year. The books that we will create will be separate books for each year. So we've gone through 24, and we recently received 24, and there are a few errors in it, so we're working with General Code to resolve those. But the years prior to that, I mean, they look great. It's just the keywords that we select to search by.
Right. And going forward, though, with the LMS, would we have the ability to look by subject matter at legislation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Monroe, just so you're aware, all of the legislation that's currently on the website, dating back to 2015, Hazel, is that correct? 2017. We have been working with our interns last summer to make sure everything is OCR readable so that come the implementation of Granicus and legislative management software, everything from that time period to present will be searchable. So the public, you all, anybody in the administration that might still be watching will be able to keyword search. So if I was looking up CDBG or I wanted to know about parks legislation, it would pull that all up from whatever we put into the system to present. So, and our hope is to start with whatever is currently on the website right now.
Oh, that's excellent. So it would be pulling from the minutes as well, so that with each item you'd be able to see if it had passed or not.
Correct. So we can talk more in detail, but what it would do for the legislation that we do have that's only in the proceedings at the moment, it would page point reference to that point in the proceedings. But we're working with the vendor to figure out what would that look like. If you had, let's say, this month's legislation package in the system right now, you would be able to look up CDBG and it would have an individual item for that specific legislation. So it'll look a little different depending on how far you go back, but it should improve transparency overall and better access to finding ordinance numbers or legislation related to topic that you're interested in.
Nice. I mean, that's a really useful and exciting project. What does OCR stand for?
Councilmember Lupian, I feel like I'm looking at you, but OCR readable just means that it converts like.
What did you say?
Yeah, optical character recognition. Thank you, Councilmember Patterson. Right now, if it's an image and there's words in it, it's not readable and scannable, which is why it's challenging to view. Like you wouldn't be able to go control find a certain text. So converting it so that it is OCR readable helps improve that optimization of word search.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
James, can you clarify? So the Speak to Council attendance key performance indicator, you said it's now nuanced. So could you explain which additions you aim to have replaced that? Page 5.
Sure. Let me just. I've got some notes here. Let me just find it for you.
Thank you.
So if you go to page 53 in the budget analysis, it talks about creating a new KPI for community engagement. And so we're going to track the number of formal public-facing engagement events where constituents engage directly with council or staff on policy programs or community priorities. But then it shows you what this KPI captures, right? So it captures the number of speak to council meetings and a bunch of other meetings, but also the number of participants. So we will still track the number of participants in the meeting as you. Yeah, I picked up when you asked the question. I didn't want you to think that somehow we didn't think it was meaningful to track how many people come to speak to council. We do think that's meaningful, but we just thought it was just such a very narrow and that this way we could expand on it and give you a much better picture of what's going on, not just with speak to council participation, but also public hearing participation and other events that we do to engage the public to really get a full picture, or I guess better to say a fuller picture of all the work that council is doing as a body to engage the public. So that's the part. I think that last bullet there says the number of participants, and the first bill with the number of speak to council meetings shows that we're going to still track. We're still going to capture that number, but it's going to be part of a bigger measure as it relates to public engagement.
I hear you. So that would be number 11, constituent engagement opportunities.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we just expanded it basically.
Thank you very much. And we'll turn it over to the clerk. And we are blessed with the special guest, Miss Bertha, in the house too. Anything we can hear from the clerk's office about what we should be looking at here?
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity, Council. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to my staff, my amazing staff. Bertha is the licensing supervisor downstairs, and under her is Curtis, Lisa, Barry, and Crystal. So all these KPIs in terms of licenses, we have them to thank for that. And behind me to my left is Ann. She works on the legislative end, and so does Joe Thomas, Jennifer Hoyt, Maria, and Maria. Thanks. I just wanted to bring a few things to your attention, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. Point out to the alarm permit KPI, that is on page 5, and that's number 23. We expect that number to increase significantly because RPD, the officer assigned to alarm permits, has been issuing tickets because people are not registering their alarms, businesses and residents, and they've issued over 500 tickets the current year. So we expect that number to increase this year and next year. With the tickets being issued, they are given the option to apply for a license within a 25-day time period, I believe. If not, then they'll have to pay the fee that's associated with that. So we do expect those numbers to increase. We've had a significant increase in requests for duplicate marriage licenses. We've received over 1,000 requests since January. And those requests are usually because of the requirement for real IDs and enhanced licenses, also for Social Security and retirement purposes, and for driver license renewals. So we spend a lot of time searching for marriage licenses. Prior to COVID, we started a project where we were converting from microfilm to digital. And in the middle of that process, the person that was responsible for the quality assurance piece, their position was eliminated. So we still have a number of images that didn't get scanned and that are not good images. So we really would love to go back and finish that project and make it more thorough. Currently, you can walk into our office and get a copy of your marriage license from '94 and above, but any years prior to that, it may be on microfilm. So we spend a lot of time doing that. Also, among our challenges are lack of space, and we've talked about that before in the past, and that's upstairs and downstairs. And we're unable to process licenses online currently, but we are working on a new system We expect that to be installed early in 2027, and that's the Enforce system, and that will give us the capacity to have more online licenses and renewals. And among those are dog licenses, dog park licenses, hack plates, Cornhill parking permits, and for service animals.
That'll be complete this year.
We expect it early in 2027.
And are you working with a PMO on that, or is that something?
Yes, and M4 is the system that'll be used for that.
Great.
And I just want to point out that there also is still no fee for the dog park. And I believe DES was working on that, but it's been that way prior to COVID.
I was going to ask a question about fees, generally speaking. We heard the administration talk a little bit about trying to increase some fees that hadn't been looked at a long time, mostly on their end. But did they engage your office and all the fees that the clerk's office ultimately oversees?
Yes, they did engage us, and we are recommending fee increases for a few licenses.
So is all that baked into the budget already? The projected numbers?
It will be, yes.
Okay. Can you share with us what the in writing is fine? Can you share with us what the expected licenses to change and what the change will be?
Sure.
Great. Any questions for the clerk's office? Council Member Leslie Smith.
Can you also share what the anticipated revenue increase would be? Yes.
Vice President Harris.
Thank you. I also want to say thank you to all your staff, and I appreciate all the work that you guys do. I would like to ask, when it comes to the online, the planning for the put everything, the licensing online, will that include? Is there a plan to include the ones before 19? You said 84, or was it 64?
94. The
94?
marriage licenses.
Yeah.
Part of the project was to go back to 1908.
1908?
Right.
Since marriages are not public information, the marriage license wouldn't be online for the public to access.
Also, you said it won't be?
For marriage license for the public to access, it won't be online because marriages are not public information.
Got it. That I didn't know that, but thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Any additional questions for the clerk's office? Councilmember Martin?
I just wanted to say a huge thank you for all the work you do up here with council and for the public-facing work you do with the community. Thank you.
Our pleasure to serve, and thank you to council staff. They help make our lives easier.
Any final questions before we move over to the PAB? Thank you very much. Dr. Myers-Small, if you wouldn't mind introducing your team who's here with you and giving us any introductory remarks you'd like to share.
Thank you. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, President Melendez, Vice President Harris, Finance Committee Chair Gruber, members of City Council, and administration representatives. Today, I am joined by two board members who are in the audience, Larry Knox and Kathy Thomas, if you just wave so everyone can see you. And then I'm also joined by a few of my leadership team members. Dolores Ivy Page is sitting behind me. She's the Director of Operations. To my immediate right is Kevin Rambolt. He serves as General Counsel. And to his right is Dr. Ashley Campbell, who is the Interim Director of Policy and Oversight. I am very appreciative to have the opportunity to speak with you today regarding the proposed budget for the Police Accountability Board, the significant transition the agency has undergone over the past year, and the measurable work we have continued to produce on behalf of the residents of Rochester. Before I begin, I would be remiss if I didn't thank the members of City Council for your unanimous support in moving forward with the appeal of the March 20th, 2026 Appellate Division decision. your definitive support sent an important message not only to Rochester residents, but also to oversight agencies across New York State and throughout the country. And you have to understand that New York State and across the country are watching what's happening here in Rochester relative to our appeal. That support also sent an important message to the community that Rochester continues to believe civilian oversight and meaningful investigatory authority indeed matter. The legal landscape changed, but our commitment to accountability did not. We continue to fight for the restoration of PAB's investigatory authority. We continue to advocate legislatively. We continue to advocate legally. And we continue to believe that independent oversight must include meaningful accountability mechanisms. As you are very well aware, the April 2025 and March 2026 court decisions fundamentally altered the operational landscape of the PAB. Those decisions required us to reassess our organizational structure, staffing model, operational priorities, and sustainability. As a result, we made difficult decisions to align the agency with its current legal authority, while continuing to advocate for the restoration of the authority the community overwhelmingly voted to create. Despite those challenges, the PAB continued to deliver measurable results for Rochester residents. Between July 1st, 2025 through the present, I'll just give you a brief overview of what the agency has accomplished. We have received and processed more than 100 public complaints, and this week alone we had 2 complaints that were walk-ins. We participated in about 175 community outreach and engagement events. We completed more than 200 communications and public education activities. We coordinated nearly 40 staff and board trainings, and as you are aware, that is mandated in the charter. We published 7 policy recommendations as well as an issue brief and a public explainer. We expanded our language access services and interpretation support beyond deaf and hard of hearing and Spanish. We launched our first public accountability dashboard. We advanced multiple policy initiatives, proposal for change, and strengthened our partnerships locally, statewide, as well as nationally. Additionally, during this reporting period, it was per the expectation of my role as executive director, I earned the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, we refer to it as NACOLS, Certified Practitioner of Oversight designation. And that requires participation in webinars and reading civilian oversight books. This reflects our commitment to national best practices and professional excellence in civilian oversight. Those accomplishments occurred while navigating active litigation, organizational restructuring, significant public scrutiny, and a rapidly changing oversight environment. As part of this transition, we repositioned the agency around a few key functions: complaint intake and pattern identification, policy analysis and systems reform, public transparency and accountability, community engagement and education, as well as data-informed oversight. This work matters because complaints are more than alleged individual allegations. They are data points that can help identify broader community concerns and systemic issues. So, for example, our data shows that the 14621 zip code generated the highest number of complaints received by the Police Accountability Board. At the same time, Our calls to arrival oversight investigation found that this area experiences some of the longest response times for Tier 2 incidents, which include fights involving weapons and missing persons. So just let that sink in just a little bit. This is exactly why oversight, data analysis, and pattern identification indeed matter. Individual alleged complaints may tell one story, but when combined with other data sources, which are disaggregated, they can reveal broader systemic issues affecting an entire community. And I think that's incredibly powerful. Those insights, in turn, can then inform policy recommendations, resource discussions, and community-centered solutions. Moving forward, the police accountability is building a more data-informed accountability model centered on public dashboards. And you can actually go to our website and see some of that work now. We're looking at trend analysis, public reporting, insight briefs, public explainers, and policy recommendations. Our goal is not simply to collect complaints. Our goal is to understand what those complaints are telling us, and then in turn use that information to improve systems, inform policy, and strengthen public trust. The staffing structure proposed for 26-27 reflects that strategic shift of the agency. We aligned positions around complaint intake, policy analysis, data evaluation, community engagement, public education, legal review, and transparency initiatives. Council members, this is not staffing for the sake of staffing. It's a structure designed to maximize public value while preserving our agency's ability to expand should investigatory authority be restored. We have also continued investing heavily in community visibility and public accessibility through neighborhood outreach, youth engagement, language access initiatives, educational presentations, and partnerships with agencies and organizations throughout Rochester. Beyond our local work here in Rochester, we are leading the development of the New York State Civilian Oversight Consortium in partnership with NACOL. Upon approval, which we anticipate within the next month, it will become the first official NACOL-affiliated statewide oversight consortium in the entire nation, establishing Rochester and New York State as national leaders in civilian oversight. The consortium is expected to serve as a pilot model for other states, helping shape the future of oversight, accountability, professional standards, and public trust across the country. Research continues to demonstrate that strong civilian oversight is associated with greater transparency, increased public trust, stronger accountability systems, and improved policing outcomes. National studies have also found that oversight entities with meaningful authority are better positioned to identify patterns of concern, support policy reform, and strengthen public confidence in government institutions. That is why exactly we continue to advocate, and we again thank you for that support, for the restoration of investigatory authority. Rochester residents overwhelmingly voted to create that. Independent investigations matter, and meaningful accountability matter. But oversight is more than investigations alone, and I know that that has been the benchmark and the hallmark of the Police Accountability Board. Communities deserve an independent and safe place to raise concerns, identify patterns, inform policy, assess transparent information, and engage in meaningful dialogue about public safety and the reimagination of public safety. They deserve a system that listens, learns, and works to prevent problems before they even occur. The form of oversight may have evolved, but the need for oversight does not disappear. In closing, ultimately, this budget is about whether Rochester continues to invest in transparency, accountability, public trust, and independent civilian oversight. While the courts altered portions of our authority, they did not eliminate the community's expectation that policing systems be transparent, accountable, and certainly responsive. We at the Police Accountability Board remain committed to providing measurable value to residents today while continuing to fight for the restoration of the authority necessary to fulfill the full vision of civilian oversight envisioned by Rochester voters and what are the pillars of what civilian oversight should look like, feel like, sound like. The work has changed, but the mission has not. I thank each of you individually and collectively for your continued partnership, support, and commitment to accountability. That concludes my formal remarks, and I welcome your questions.
Thanks. We'll go down the line. Vice President Harris.
Thank you, Chair Gruber. Thank you so much for that report. It sheds a lot of insight as to the breadth of what the PAB is becoming, alongside of, waiting for investigative powers to be restored. As many of you guys know, I come from public safety, and in my years, 30 plus years as a paramedic, I've always, as a paramedic in public safety, have been held accountable by an oversight board. If I had a problem with a patient, whether it be, civil or even criminal and even medical, all of those three, it goes through that board, Monroe-Livingston County EMS Council. So, I believe that our colleagues in the police department should be held accountable as well, the same way. Of course, we're not there yet. We're still working on putting those pieces together, but I believe that, accountability breeds a good system. Our EMS system still has work to do, but it still breeds good things when you are able to, hold people accountable. Iron sharpens iron. And that's what I was told. That's how I was trained. So I am optimistic. I hope my colleagues here will remain optimistic. And, but we also need to be very honest with you guys that, we have concerns. And, we're going to do what we can to continue the fight, because we know that, like you said, the entire country is looking at us, including New York State, for this. And, iron sharpens iron. We got to make sure that we hold our men and women in law enforcement accountable. And then that also is not always punitive. MLREMS, Monroe-Livingston EMS Council, also does a significant amount of education and training and all these other things. So, it's not always a bad thing. So, we have work to do, and I'm looking forward to supporting this work. I do just want to ask one thing, and I want to say thank you to your staff, you and your staff, for weathering these storms, and thank you to the board, But we just need to also remember, council here is a support. We need to do better at our relationship. And I think that we're there. Thank you, Dr. Myers-Small, for bringing us to this point, and all of, your staff. But we've got to continue to work on our relationship between PAB and council. So, got to keep fostering that relationship. So I would say is, one of the things that I did ask is for you and your staff to consider looking at AI, uses of AI in the law enforcement realm. And you talked about some of the reports that you guys do. We had some folks come to council to present to us about AI, and I talked to President Melendez, and he agreed that this would be a good place to have you guys help us seek that information out. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but if you can give me some thoughts about that.
I do. Thank you for the comments and thank you for the question. So after you and I met and we discussed it and then you sent the information, I think AI in whatever field that you're looking at, people are trying to figure out how does this work in education? How does this work for policing? So I think it's incredibly powerful as it relates to law enforcement, how you can responsibly use it. What I've been learning as I've been studying about AI is the bias that is within AI, right? And so, people will plug into ChatGPT, or I forget the other one that's new, they'll plug into that. And I just did a simple test, and I said, portray an African-American young man who is coming home from school, and he's having an interaction with law enforcement, and just kind of play out a story for me. And then I plugged in a white young man is coming home from school looking a little suspicious, play out that story for me. And this was in ChatGPT. The African-American young man ended up getting arrested, and the white young man ended up going home to his family, right? And it's just playing out the story of just using race as an indicator. So obviously there's something built in there, right? So we need to responsibly look at AI and to ensure that it's being used. So I hope that's a good example, but I was really interested in just looking at bias, and that was just a simple litmus test.
I appreciate that, and that's the one thing I learned from education, because as a teacher, we teach the students that you're pulling from all sources. AI pulls from everything that we have on the internet, and it picks up human bias automatically unless it's bypassed by some kind of system. And I don't think that's happening. So I appreciate that, and I'll yield and I'll say, if I have additional questions, I will put them in writing.
Thank you.
Thank you to you and your team for the hard work that you all have been doing. One of the recommendations that I have just moving forward is having you attend our public safety meetings. I think having you in our presence on a regular basis and being able to have regular conversation with you would be very helpful. I also just want to note that I'm in full support of the PAB. I do think that it's really unfortunate having lost our investigative powers. And I'm grateful that to this body for being in full support of going as far as we possibly can go until there absolutely is nowhere else for us to go. The other thing that I just want to, there's really no questions, but I really just want to know the unique position that you are in, Dr. Myers-Small, in terms of having to be an individual who reports to two boards, essentially, reporting to the PAB board, reporting to this city council board. And one of the things that I am committed to is ensuring that when we hire good people, we get out the way and we give them the support that they need, but we also trust the decisions that they make. We provide any type of buffers that are needed in terms of supporting budget changes and staffing changes, whatever that is. It's very, very difficult to be an individual who leads an institution, an organization, an entity, a department, if there are so many cooks in the kitchen. And so that is my individual commitment to you and to your team. And my hopes that my colleagues will join in that as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Leslie Smith.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for all the work you do and for continuing to support not just City Council's role of oversight, but also the community and understanding the patterns in the police department that are relevant. And the reports that you guys have put out, I think, have been really important. My question is maybe a little uncomfortable and maybe can't even answer it. There have been some issues with some staff and the union integrating them into AFSCME. And I know that there was a court decision recently around their benefits, and I wondered if you would be able to talk about if they were able to regain the benefits that they had before joining the union.
I appreciate that question. In my previous role as superintendent, I was at the table. As the executive director, I'm not at the table. And so decisions are made. Sometimes I'm asked for input, but I don't sit at the table, so I don't, when I was superintendent, I could say, yes, let's go up another 0.5% and pay for health care, or if we, doing things around professional development. But I don't have that same authority as executive director.
Do you know the status of it? You just don't know.
I know they are my understanding is that
They're
are
still
at
negotiating.
the final stages of working out the negotiations and
Got it.
settling it.
Okay.
But I don't sit at the table.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate the question.
All right. So I had a question that I offered to Chief Smith that I want to offer back to you. So I know we've discussed community satisfaction survey of the police department, or some type of survey to analyze public sentiment. And asking that question of the chief, it was a matter of money. Can you, from your perspective, give me a sense of what it will take to do for the PAB to do a public survey around satisfaction of the police department?
Thank you for that question, President Melendez. It takes a few things. Certainly, we want to make sure that the survey has good questions, right, in it. So we're going to get at what are the things that we're looking at? What do we need? The other piece of it is that you have to market, and I believe Councilmember Smith, when she was talking earlier about lead and making sure that people understand what is going on, we can't just expect to put something on the website, or we can't just expect to send a letter or an email. We really have to go through the radio stations. We have to market this, right? And we have to get the word out. We also, and we do, I think, a really nice job through our public affairs and community engagement team, working with neighborhood associations and getting out and getting the word out that a survey is available. But the other thing is, when you're doing anything around surveys, you're basically collecting data for research purposes, and you want to make sure that you triangulate that. So it can't just be, an old school Scantron. We want to also talk with individuals and do focus groups and have conversations, because you have some individuals that may be intimidated by a survey. They don't have the inclination or the time to want to fill out a survey, but they will sit with you and engage and say, let me tell you what I think is going well with RPD, or what's not going well. We absolutely want to be involved in that, but we have such a small budget, we just can't fund that. But we have the person power where we could move forward and we could create a quality survey that includes the focus groups, so both the quantitative and the qualitative aspects to that, but we would also need to have that marketing and communications component involved with it as well.
Could you, in writing after this, give us a sense of what you think that would be in terms of cost?
We have it done, so we can get that for you.
Great. So second question, I also asked, and I don't know if it was that same hearing or a different hearing, but I asked around the issue of access to SharePoint. I think it was an RPD. And I do see Corporation Counsel here. I don't know if he's able to potentially chime in if there's questions too. But in our conversations, there was a concern that there was just a blind shut off. There was no communication, to your recollection, around losing access to SharePoint. When I asked in the hearing, essentially what was said is that there's kind of two components of SharePoint, one that was focused on investigations, one that was focused on policy and oversight. and that the investigation side of the house was shut off. Could you just give us a lay of the land of what you have access to in terms of SharePoint?
Sure, and I'm actually glad Patrick is here because we are due for another meeting to sit and actually talk about this. So when we conduct the policy and oversight, there's more general information. The information in SharePoint that has been cut off, and I am sharing this with you because I already had the conversation with Captain Sweatman. Just so the public knows who's listening, Captain Sweatman is appointed through the Rochester Police Department to be the liaison between RPD and the Police Accountability Board. So he's full-time support. And one of the things that we had agreed that if anything was going to change fundamentally, if anything was going to be put out, that we would call in before we called out. And so I called him on it because I said, we've had access since April 28th, 2025, when the first court decision, and we still were able to. He said, well, when March 20th came, we needed to shut that off. Respectfully, if we are still eligible or able to look at pattern identification, look at trends, in order for us to be able to do that, we have to have access to that. And Patrick and I have had intense fellowship about this, but I really appreciate that you're bringing this to the table. We need to bringing this question up. We need to get back to the table because I don't know if it's a concern. We are not going to individually investigate. We've known that since April 28th, 2025. We cannot do that. We have not broken that rule or that ruling since that time. Then the March 20th came down and it just got shut off. So the long story short, we need to come back to the table, and if we need to sign a non-disclosure that we're not going to individually investigate, this is something that would really help us to be able to do that pattern identification that I spoke about in my opening remarks. And I do believe that there's a way through, respectfully.
Thank you. And I suppose that just what I would ask is that there is that follow-up scheduled ASAP, just so that we can get on the same page and verify what issues there currently are, and that we work through those expeditiously. Because I do think it's important that we do not further, trying to find a better word than handicap, but that we do not further harm the ability of the PAB to do the things that they are authorized under the charter to do. That concludes my questions for now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dr. Meyer-Small, I appreciate your remarks, and I think that you have brought such a great degree of stability to the Police Accountability Board and transparency and honesty. I sometimes I shudder to think or shudder is the wrong word, but it startles me to think what could have happened if the inaugural Police Accountability Board Executive Director had approached the City Council in the same way, and if there had been an opportunity to get the two organisms to work together in the way that clearly you are trying to now. And I completely hear Councilmember Leslie Smith's perspective that when you hire good people, stay out of their way. And I don't intend to be in your way much, but I do have a couple of pretty specific questions, because the reality is this is not a good budget year for the city of Rochester.
Mm-hmm.
We just spent 3 days talking to every single department, and there's no department that is not seeing substantial reduction in things. And when I look at it's not so much the dollar amount, although it rolls up to the dollar. When I look at the personnel listing,
mm-hmm.
it's hard for me to make heads or tails of how the PAB, given what its current authority is, needs to have a staff of roughly 20 people. And I want to be clear. I hope that the PAB gets every single authority granted back to it. I hope the courts reverse what I think is a very bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I am committed personally to continue to do what it takes from a legislative perspective to fight for that. But in the meantime, knowing what we know right now, I'll give an example. I don't functionally understand how the PAB can have a full-time webmaster and a full-time communications manager. How much time, what is a webmaster doing for 40 hours a week for this body right now, given that there is no actual investigations going on? I'll actually ask that question.
Sure, and I'm going to pause just for a second because I anticipated that question, Councilmember Groover. So I have two things. I have the org chart. It's actually 16 staff, but it's close to 20. But I just want to be specific. And then I created just a one-pager front and back about staffing model justification. The webmaster, I did not anticipate that was going to be on there, but I can talk about that. But I can update this. But if you would mind passing that out.
Can we actually talk about so in the budget book on page 8, there's substantially more than 16 positions. So perhaps the listing of who's in FY27 is not aligned with what the reality is. But
may I jump in?
Please.
I believe that there are 20 budgeted positions.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
and 16 are filled right now.
Yes, thank
okay.
you. Thank you.
Okay, so which of the 4 positions are not filled?
So one of the oversight manager positions is not budgeted. There are 2, I'm sorry, not filled. Thank you. Oversight not filled, 2 data analysts not filled, a bilingual case manager, and that's 4. That's 4.
Thank you. So I'll just share with you, I appreciate you. So this is the org chart, and then this is...
That's just the justification of the
staffing model.
Yes.
And I presume that it would be easy enough to get job descriptions for the positions on the org chart.
Absolutely.
So I'll just tell you when I am completely out of the weeds of the PAB. I am the last remaining council member to be one of the authors of the original legislation, and I was in the weeds for a while until the inaugural executive director made it clear that he wanted no council members anywhere near the weeds, and I listened, and so I've been pretty out of the weeds since then.
Sure.
So when I look at it from my perspective now, it is hard for me to understand 4 community engagement specialists when we're not even soliciting complaints.
So we are still collecting complaints. We're not individually analyzing those complaints, but there's a couple of things. One, let me go back to the beginning when you said the webmaster.
Sure.
So the webmaster, we are making much more data publicly available. And so that information, he's always creating new charts and graphs for us. He's putting up information. We have remember, we have a separate website from the City of Rochester website. So he manages our website entirely. We get many attacks against our website. So he's monitoring to make sure that it's not corrupted and things of that nature. But I can absolutely show you how the 40 hours are being spent. We need that. We don't have the IT, the website support. We do that more internally as far as our own website.
So because you gave me a document for justification
Sure.
and the org chart, I'm not going to ask you to respond to any of this. I'm going to share with you how I'm feeling right now,
Okay.
and I will examine all this.
Great.
I didn't have a chance to review it beforehand, obviously.
Right.
And I hope it can, and I'll make one kind of final point, and then I'll turn it back to you. But
Sure.
It is hard for me to imagine a world where the PAB has a webmaster and a communications manager, given the circumstances right now. It is hard for me to understand how the PAB can have 4 community engagement specialists, given what the authority is right now. 2 case managers, given the lack of investigatory abilities, seems like far more than I can understand.
Okay.
3 data analysts, a 1.5 for both an executive assistant and a secretary to the PAB, 2 oversight managers, 2 staff attorneys, which, by the way, the city of Rochester has. Patrick, how many attorneys in Corp Council? 14? 20? So how many? 16 attorneys for about 3,000 employees, and the PAB has 2 attorneys for 16 employees. Doesn't seem exactly comparable there. And then I certainly wouldn't make any comments about the leadership team. I think having strong leadership and having a director, executive director, and a deputy executive director does make a lot of sense for a body like this. But those things, even when you talk about the webmaster, we just had a long conversation about how our attorney position went away. I'll just share a quick anecdote that one of the initial arguments that I got into with the PAB at this point 6 years ago was, instead of hiring a bunch of their own attorneys, let's start by having a joint attorney for the city council when we were first trying to hire our own attorney, and have that attorney be able to split time with the PAB for some of the PAB stuff that needed to happen, and let's see where it goes from there. And there was an adamant response from the PAB at the time saying, absolutely not, this is a completely separate function, we do not want anything to do with this. We have a growing and I think productive communications arm out of the council that could probably do a decent amount of the communication, or spend a decent amount of time doing the communications, or at least reducing the cost of some of the communications and web management that is currently done by the PAB. The point that I'm trying to make is the PAB sees itself as completely distinctive and separate. And having a budget right now of budgeted 20 positions and $2.6 million, given how little authority it has to do much of what it was originally charged to do, doesn't feel like the highest and best use of our dollars right now. That doesn't mean that I don't believe that the work needs to get done. And so I would really ask you to consider, what are the ways that we can build in some efficiencies? Every other department across the city of Rochester has had to eliminate vacant positions. Every other department across the city of Rochester has had to find ways to cut major supplies and equipment. I don't see it happening here, with the exception of the investigators themselves, and that was driven really by the court decision. So I'd be happy for you to respond to that. I'm also happy to look at what you shared and have a follow-up conversation, whatever you prefer.
And thank you for those questions, because I understand about being fiscally responsible, but I'm going to respond with, I believe that what we put forward is fiscally responsible. We did, if you looked, it's 8 positions, right, from the legal piece. And over the past 3 years, we've eliminated a director of case management, the director of investigations. We eliminated in this budget a director of public affairs and community engagement. So I'll push back a little bit and say, so we eliminated that position. Some of that is redistributed a little bit amongst those foreign community engagement specialists that we have, including one that is bilingual. They are getting out into the community and they are having conversations. Our KPIs, if you've had a chance to look at them, Councilmember Gruber, are off the chart. They're getting out there, they're connecting. So while the investigatory component was eliminated, there are other pieces of the charter that were not invalidated, that having a more robust policy and oversight team would allow us to do some of that data analysis and things of that nature. But hearing your questions, what I'd like to do, please take a look at what I've given you, but I can supplement that with some additional information of why the 16 that are currently, and then if we're additionally allowed to hire those other 4, would be a justification. I'd like to map that out.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martin.
I have several questions. I will start with saying I do think it's deeply unfair to you, Director Myra Smalls, that issues that happened with previous directors somehow fall on your shoulders till this day. It's been several years. I see you are trying to do things differently, so I want to acknowledge that you are in a tough position, but I do think it's deeply unfair that previous issues are falling on your shoulders, especially when we have a whole bunch of issues that we have to talk about and face at this moment. So in the budget, I see that there's a 23% decrease in the PAB budget. I know for some it may feel like it's still a lot of money, but I see a very significant variance from last year. I also want to maybe ask Sarah, is there any other department that's seen a 23% cut?
Without looking through the budget book, I can't promise you, but I can't think of one that is that high. I will point out this is a bureau within a department. So sometimes departments have more consistent cuts across bureaus. Sometimes it is more mixed like this, so it's sort of department by department.
Yeah,
but the total, I'm sorry. Is that okay? So when Council President was talking about the process that we have, we do provide what we call the maintenance of effort to each department. What would it cost you next year to do what you're doing now? And then later we come back with the BLA, the budget level allocation, which is sort of the cut number, we sometimes call it. And so every department did get a cut number. So that process was all the same, department by department.
That's helpful.
Okay.
Yes, and looking through, and you're the expert, so I wanted to see if maybe something stuck out. But in writing, when you go back and look through, let me know. I always like comparing. So we know the 6 investigators were laid off. However, on page 7, it says that there's a net 8 full-time positions eliminated.
Yes.
What are the other 2 positions that have been eliminated?
So it's the other digital forensic analyst. That position was vacant. And then the director of investigations.
Gotcha. Thank you. So I want to focus a bit on the layoffs.
Sure.
Each year when the mayor releases a budget, he has a letter that basically says the amount of money allocated is for this year. It guarantees certain positions. So based on that being in the last budget, the positions of the 6 people who were laid off had their positions budgeted till the end of this year. So what was the reason behind them being laid off? They weren't terminated for cause, they were laid off.
Sure.
What was the reason behind doing it then instead of waiting till the end of the year like most other departments are doing?
So I thank you for that question, Council Member. A couple of things. So back on April 28th, 2025, we were not allowed to conduct investigations. And so at that time, we could have conducted the layoffs, and we did not. We wanted, because we were moving forward with the appeals, and we wanted to try and figure out how we could quickly pivot and provide some additional services to the city through the Police Accountability Board. So once the March 20th, 2026 decision was made, it became clear that operationally we couldn't do the investigations. And so at this point, in my opinion, I felt it was necessary to align our staffing structure to the legal reality that the agency was facing. Waiting, to me, until June 30th would have delayed some restructuring that we needed to do. And I have to really focus on the prolonged uncertainty. Staff were very, very nervous back in April, and I came before City Council. And again, you all were very supportive of moving forward. But it was a matter of, we know that we're not going to be able to move forward. There was a lot of angst, and so made the decision just to move forward. I think the other thing that's important to talk about is certainly so if we made the decision, the budget book came out, May 8th, around there, right? So we would have staff that knew that they weren't going to be moving forward. That's difficult not only on them, but it's difficult on the agency. People are seeing, oh my goodness, you're not working here anymore. So I thought it just made sense that we know that we can't move forward with the investigatory power. Let's move forward and then begin restructuring sooner rather than later.
Thank you. So it was ultimately your decision to do this. Okay. Can you explain your reasoning for not talking with AFSCME about this. We received a letter from Robert Leonard, who I'm sure you all know, and he spoke about how the process for laying off these employees was distinct from the usual process, where they find out when the budget book comes up, they try to negotiate, conversations are had in good faith. Can you explain why you went a different path?
So I listened to the hearing between Human Resources. That's not a function that I serve. I rely on the Department of Human Resource Management to negotiate that. The only conversation that I've had with Robert Leonard was when they were forming and we were over in the DNC building and they wanted to come over. I don't negotiate anything with them. That's a human resource function. So I don't notify and say that it's happening. That's something that Human Resources does on the agency's behalf.
Thank you for your responses. So, you know, I guess I'm a bit confused. You made the decision to lay them off after they came to speak to council on April 16th, and they were laid off April 17th, immediately following the union speaking to council. I just want to be clear, those two aren't correlated. So I'm just talking about the sequence, right?
I'm
not saying,
got you.
Right, the sequence, April 16th, AFSCME union employees came and spoke. April 17th in the morning, we hear that 6 people are laid off. Knowing the process, right, where you can notify, or when did you notify Human Resources? Maybe that's a better question, since you're saying it's their job to then notify AFSCME.
I'd have to go back and actually look at that.
Thank you.
And I think we're getting into territory that we probably would want to have a conversation in executive session, because it's involving labor and personnel, and I'm happy to talk about anything, but I want to be very, very careful as we're treading, I think, in an area that we should.
So in writing on when you notified HR, when Patrick Beath was notified, all in writing would be perfect, and I will definitely keep that confidential to honor you and what you're saying. Was community involved in the decision to make those layoffs? You do have a robust community engagement team. I see them everywhere doing amazing things. Was there an opportunity to talk to community about what restructuring and layoffs would look like?
So again, when you're talking about the way that our process is in the city of Rochester, we don't have conversations about layoffs ahead of time. And correct me if I'm wrong, if I don't understand this process. It's a difficult process, but it's one that we adhere to. The decision is made to lay off, and then the letters are created through the Department of Human Resource Management, and then basically I assemble the staff, and then the Department of Human Resources takes over and has the conversation. Right? It's not necessarily a process that I like, but it's our process and something maybe that we could look at. But it's not like we can. My understanding is that we can't say a month, 2 weeks. Oh, we're going to lay you off and we're going to have this meeting. And it appears, I'll say it, it appears to be a very cold process, and it seems unfeeling. I was sitting in there. It's hard, but that's our process of the way, because there are legal components to it, there are human resource components to it, but it is the process that we have in the city.
So, and I think that's the struggle, right? Because your process that you explained is a bit different from other departments who are experiencing layoffs, right? Their staff are going through to the end of the fiscal year. So I think I fully agree that maybe we should have a conversation, and maybe why that information was given to you and why others are doing things differently. Because I think part of why it feels so cruel is because of how other employees in the city are treated. Last 2 questions I have. So when the staff were laid off on April 17th, there was a letter sent out that said that the decision was made by city council and clerk's office. And as a longtime supporter of the PAB, it appeared like I or some of my other colleagues were involved in that decision based on the letter. Can you talk to me about why it said that versus a decision made by HR and you and law?
That's not a letter. So terminations, which are different, I sign off on. The layoffs come from the Department of Human Resource Management. So the letters that were given to the 6 individuals who were laid off came straight from Department of Human Resource Management. There was no signature from me. So the letter was given to them on that day.
Right. But you approved, like you made the decision, you let them know, and it was essentially done on your behalf, right?
Yes.
Right. So I think another conversation to have, if staff could take notes, maybe we talk to HR about making sure that it's clear when these decisions are made, that it's not from council, it's from the director in partnership with the administration.
Mm-hmm. Can I jump in, council member? So our department is council clerk, and I think semantically, and I understand what you're saying, but I think semantically, in terms of the layoff letter, it's coming from council clerk to the department, and I think that's where the confusion lies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would absolutely request for that to be changed. I think the implications of such a decision and what it says about council is just not something I'm in line with. It's very easy to just change the form, and I would really ask us to do that. Again, the director has full authority on that kind of decision making, and I just want to make sure it's not relayed in a way that is not consistent with who makes the decisions.
Can I just mention that layoff letters come from your appointing authority?
We may need to change that whole process.
That's a civil service function.
I think we need to really look into it, truly. It's so inappropriate that 6 employees were laid off, and the name on it says City Council and Clerk's Office. Maybe there needs to be an explanation on that letter, but if someone reads it and the information I got was, why did council decide to lay us off, right? So that's inappropriate. So maybe some things can be done to balance the needs of civil service and also clarity and making sure people know who is responsible for decision making. Thank you. And last question I have. It's about data access, and I think it's more so for Patrick. Patrick, are you able to get to a mic? Not your hearing? So you're not going to answer questions? All right. Wow. So yesterday, Patrick specifically said, and now I can speak for you since you've decided not to speak, that there weren't issues around data access when it comes to policy and oversight, that the only issues that exist were around investigations. Can you clarify that?
So the SharePoint access was cut off about a month ago for the individual the individual complaint. And so in order for us to do the pattern identification, and this is, Patrick and I have gone back and forth and back about this, because there's the concern that we will have access to an individual information. We're not conducting an individual. We're looking for patterns. In order for us to determine if it's a pattern, we have to look at individual complaints. So we've done the awkward junior high school dance over and over again, trying to figure out how to get to a better place, but we just haven't been able to. And did you want to add something? No. Okay.
So it sounds like there may be problems with policy, with data access relating to policy and oversight.
No, not policy and oversight. We still have access to that. That's not the issue. In order for the policy and oversight team to look for patterns and trends, we need this other access through SharePoint.
So the lack of access impacts policy and oversight. Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you.
Corporation Counsel, I understand this is in your hearing, but you are our legal advisor and our attorney, and I just wonder if you could maybe talk through some next steps on this matter and how we would proceed.
And it's so interesting how when the president asks, you go, but when I ask, you didn't.
I asked because of you. Yeah.
Yeah, we can have that conversation with the PAB. We can continue it. I've asked for access to the SharePoint site so I can see what's in there. My understanding is that it's far more than a listing or a record of complaints received, that it's all of the RPD materials related to the misconduct investigations. So I just want to make sure we've got bright lines here.
Thank you. Thank you for asking, Council President. I appreciate it.
I just want to go back to the process with layoffs, because I don't want to appear that I'm throwing the Department of Human Resource Management under the bus, but there's a process that we have, and that process is what we followed, right? And so I just want to make that clear, right? That the letters are sent, there's a process. If there's layoffs, that the way that the communication occurs. But I also was trying to articulate, I can understand where it would feel cold and difficult for the staff members of any time, whether you're laid off or you're terminated, you're not going to be working for the organization anymore, and that is very difficult. And so looking at different ways that we could do that is certainly something that I'd be willing to participate in, but it's our process, and that's how it happens. The thing that I had, again, leadership requires accountability and transparency. I reached out to HR for that decision to be made, but then they took over and did the paperwork and did the notifications. That is the role and the part that they play in it. And I want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, it's all very difficult to talk about.
It is.
I believe everyone here cares about the city, accountability, transparency. So I just want to say thank you for answering these difficult questions.
Sure.
I will continue to support the PAB.
Thank you.
And wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I want to note that WXXI unfortunately has to take off. Thank you for staying 30 minutes extra. We really appreciate it. We will still finish the hearing with our last 3 council members, but it will not be televised. So, Councilmember Monroe.
So, do we have, or you have a written policy and procedures about the process of decision making? What is in the director's sole purview? What must be formally approved by the board? What is the formal leadership relationship between PAB and council? And in that, I'm thinking about, the very specific kind of firewalls that had been put in place in order for the PAB to run independently. The organizational chart helps, but if you could either discuss that now or offer it to me in writing, that would be so helpful, especially if we do have any of those kinds of